Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
Public comment is welcome on any item that comes before the committee. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. Please come forward to the microphone in the middle of the room and be recognized, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to make your comments on that particular item. Ask for roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters.
Here.
Murguia. Townsend.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
McKernan.
Here. There were no revisions to our agenda after it was originally published, so our first item of business is approval of our standing committee minutes from our meeting of March 4th, 2019.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve those minutes as submitted. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved as submitted, which takes us to our committee agenda. And item number one on the committee agenda tonight is an update on a SOAR initiative, the Land Asset Management Program. And so I'm going to turn it over to Assistant County Administrator Sieben.
All right, good evening, commissioners. So tonight, we want to give you a little background on a project that we started working on in probably late last year, although it had been bubbling below the surface for a number of years. And this is about land asset management and what we're wanting to try to achieve, which I think will meet a lot of the needs of the commission and the community as we move forward. So I'm going to turn over to start the program to Tib Laughlin, and then we'll kind of go back and forth and see questions at the end.
2 years ago this month, the commission approved our starting to treat land in a smarter way. To treat land as an asset instead of just a liability, not something we just had to manage, but something that has potential for us. That marks the kickoff of the Opportunity Knocks rehab program and the dramatic improvements we've seen there. But that was just the start of what we were charged to do. In addition to bringing transparency, equity, and consistency across the board.
That one's my slide.
Oh, your slide, huh? Sorry. The transparency, equity, and consistency will now continue with Melissa.
It said Melissa on a slide, but it's okay. Okay, so what we're going to walk through in the next two slides is what we are trying to achieve with this land asset management group. The first is really around customer service and communications with our residents by continuing to develop the open data that we have, mostly primarily land data is what we're talking about here, and doing innovative work and problem solving in that area to help people be able to better use that data. The other thing that we're also trying to do is work on our reducing blight, and one of the things that is necessary is effective land management practices. So in doing so, this team is going to be establishing best practices and providing a work plan related to the UG's assets, both public and private. We've seen that over the last number of years, kind of some of the inconsistencies in the data hygiene that create questions when we try to provide information, especially to the commission. So the team will be working on an annual work plan, some of which you'll see in the coming slides, as well as be very very multi-departmental in its representation. The other thing that we're working on is reviewing and making recommendations on land assets. You'll see one of those come up tonight that Chris will present. We are also trying to establish the data governance policies, kind of the formalization of those throughout the organization. We adopted some policies on that a couple years ago, but really haven't gotten to the kind of deep work that needs to be done with those. To provide quality data that's accurate and that you can trust when you're looking at it. The other thing is just implementing best practices to help move the organization forward, especially to become a leader in land asset management. So this concept is out there. It's just we would like to take over and do the best we can instead of kind of be lagging in this area. The other thing is to provide necessary training to the organization, so we'll work with the knowledge office on that, and especially related to our land practices, making sure that all those different departments that touch our land, make sure they are understanding the reasoning why things need to be put in the same, be available for folks to look at and be able to trust and have them be accurate. Go ahead, now it's you.
You can see it's a heavily integrated team from across the unified government. We're dealing with complex issues here. We're dealing with things that go back decades in some cases. We're looking at how now that we have turned the corner on the depopulation of our county, we are now working on rebuilding markets, rebuilding neighborhoods, rebuilding individual properties. And this integrated team is preserving the value, looking at how we best preserve the value of our community for future generations by addressing things with equity and transparency. We're formalizing our processes, standardizing things, applying transparency and equity. This isn't just about what one neighbor would like. It's about what's in the value and interest of the entire neighborhood. When we are looking at rebuilding neighborhoods, that's not just an individual decision. That's a whole neighborhood and a community decision. And we have to have transparent and consistent policies that support that goal for now and for future generations. We are rebuilding value, but sometimes that means making hard decisions on an individual choice over what's the good for the whole neighborhood. We've got the formalized demolition process. We have problems with exemptions that were never filed the way they were supposed to be when the UG acquired property that we're still going in and cleaning up. We return property to land banks to have those cleaned, but we don't have a recipient to take those back at the moment. Those are samples of some of the issues we're working on. It's a very heavy data hygiene project as we clean up the history. We've got to identify, as I say, properties with partial UG surpluses. You know these properties, they sit out there, they say land bank or they say unified government or board of commissioners. They show up on the map and they say the unified government owes property tax, which is not the case. Each and every one of those is an error, but it takes a lot of work to work through each of those problems. We have right-of-ways that say that there are houses in the middle of Parallel Parkway when there are plainly no houses in the middle of Parallel Parkway. Each of these things takes a lot of time and effort to fix. This team is working on those finally in a concerted effort. And again, looking at the incremental development potential, taking blocks where we have one or two houses left and looking at how we acquire those and market that as a whole infrastructure-ready block for redevelopment, as opposed to infill around just two missing teeth.
Right. So basically what we're trying to do is set the stage for the next version of the land bank, as well as the future versions of our neighborhoods from an incremental perspective. What we want to do is work with the commission and with the land bank to establish fair and equitable, consistent management policies for our land assets. The idea is that they're sustainable, They help us reinvigorate our tax base and allow for infill and work towards highest and best use. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Chris to handle the next couple of slides.
Thank you. These next two slides will kind of illustrate stuff that you guys already know and already have your head wrapped around, but this is also for the audience and the people watching at home. This demonstrates here on this slide, based on a new home construction and the revenue it would generate versus how many yard extensions would that equal. In this scenario that we worked up, we have 200 yard extensions, and the taxes generated to the unified government would equal that one new house. We would love to come before you each month and say we have another 5, 10, 100 houses getting ready to be built. Please approve those. We think we're getting there. We're just not there yet. I will also add that probably in the last year, I've had more inquiries about new construction, new development than I probably had in the previous 10 years combined. So I think we really are turning that corner on making Wyandotte County a good, accessible area to develop. And this slide again is just to show you the difference in certain areas of whether we're selling something for a yard extension, whether we're trying to get something built, and in the meantime, what is that in between? And I think that's one of the policies we'll recommend tonight for you. And this again is kind of saying the same way. So if we did sell a property for a yard extension, you know, the unified government does save $300 roughly on the mowing expenses. There's roughly about a $50 city-county tax that would have to be paid out. So it's about a $250 net gain per year versus roughly about $2,100 a new house could generate in taxes. So again, this is spread out over 10 years. Again, I think this is stuff that you guys comprehend and understand, but we just wanted to, again, give you a visual on the potential of where we're going to make the decisions on straight sales, straight maybe possible lease options in certain areas, and then coming up with those type of strategies for you. So with that, I think we'll ask if there's any questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon. What are you recommending for us to do with regard to the presentation you just gave?
This is just an update on what staff's working on to help clean up our data around land assets, and to show you that we are actually following the direction of the commission about trying to treat our land differently. And I think we wanted to let you know that we're working on it and we're working through it systematically, and that, I'm gonna go back. These are some of the things that we're working on this year. Tib didn't cover them in detail, but what they have here is, this is a lot of work. This is not easy. It's looking at every land record that we have and asking how it should be handled, or if it's in the systems correctly. And we have multiple systems that cross over each other. And you know, I give the example all the time of, you have an address of North 5th Street. Well, how is that in the system? Is it N.period 5th ST period? Or is it in there as North 5th STERTT or ET? It's how we put it in, and those all create conflicts when you're moving between systems, and also when you're making queries. Tib referenced the fact that we have public land in there under Unified Government, City of Kansas City, Kansas, Board of Commissioners, and it goes on and on. I believe there's like 14 different iterations of how we call ourselves. So when you say generate a report on this, staff has to literally query for all those different things. So what we're trying to do is go in, clean that kind of stuff up, but then also when it gets over to like unfits and vacant houses and demo properties, looking at how we're handling those to try and effectively try to save houses if it's possible, as opposed to just tear them down. So the group is collaborating around what is the structure, how does that look like, and when do we say enough is enough. So there's a lot to this, and it's not something that we're going to be able to fly through, because it's detail work, pretty intensive detail work. And the land bank's only one part of this.
And if I could add on really quick, Catherine Carter at Economic Development. This is also to tee up the next thing on the agenda, which is the recommended lease policy, which gives us a bit more flexibility, as we discussed, to have some different options for what we do with land bank land, to kind of use it at its highest and best use, and also kind of give us amount of time to let the public use it while also determining kind of what the market looks like.
So as this group, this team evaluates these policies and the best use for land, you're looking not only at just properties held in the land bank, but what other properties?
Well, there's a little bit of a discernment there. There's stuff that's in the land bank that was meant to come in and come back out simply to clear the tax status as it was UG right-of-way or other property that the UG wouldn't divest of. So that's part of what we're trying to clean up. So it may be temporarily sitting in the land bank, but ultimately it's going to be back in the hands of the, say, Public Works Department. It's still unified government property. It's how you classify it. The land bank is holding things it doesn't need to hold. And that's something else we're trying to work on. This is very complicated stuff. So you look concerned.
Well, no, I'm just trying to get clarification so I understand. So the team is looking at project or land just within the land bank or other land as well?
All land in Wyandotte County. Not to do something with it necessarily, but to make sure that our nomenclature on how we name things is the same across different data sets, that we actually understand what is for sale and what isn't for sale. Chris has to kind of route things around when things are being asked to be purchased, because we did move right of way in and we have no interest in divesting of it. And so we're trying to figure out how we get that out and how we make that transfer back to a responsible party. So there's a lot of moving parts on this.
So if the team were to want to make recommendations regarding land bank policy or some other policy, how would we, the Board of Commissioners or this body, see that come through for action?
All of this will come back as parts and pieces are formalized. The first one there, the demolition process, has already been back through, and we've presented on what we were doing. It was kind of an information only, but all of these, as they move their way through, Chris will come back if they're land bank only, if they're not land bank, but they're things between our, property tax system and appraisal system. Those things, if they need to, will come back through here. So a lot of it should be almost invisible, except for when you go to search like UG maps, suddenly things will be a little more consistent. So.
And then the last question I had dealt with the slide that had, I guess, the values compared to private lots versus, maybe it's the next one, that one. Again, what are we to get from this slide? Is the purpose to show that
really what we're trying to show you, Commissioner, is, and again, I think you already get this, is that any new house generated is going to create more tax revenue for the unified government versus a yard extension. We're not saying yard extensions are bad. We're not saying property acquisitions can be bad. But I think what we've started doing since this group's been formed is look at the mechanisms on making the decisions on whether this is the best course of action to take today versus maybe a year from now, maybe 10 years, and maybe further down the road, that can then turn around and then spark the decision or the request we're bringing to you guys to make based on that individual property.
okay. So with this analysis, let's say future, someone wants to buy or purchase land from the land bank that are yard extension or multiple properties. Will this analysis be part of your recommendation as to whether that would?
I mean, it could be if we have all the information on what they're proposing to build as far as square footage and total building costs, and if we have a way to compare that to already existing housing stock, I mean, yeah, we could bring that. But I think I'm just going to stop right there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I want to go back to the 6 block slide that you had. the lower middle, returning properties to clear the taxes back to proper status, to put the land back. If the yard extensions or the vacant lots wanted to be used for a community garden or a common space, wouldn't the organization or the individual have a chance to purchase that property prior to it coming into the land bank, knowing that it was delinquent, possibly paying the delinquent taxes on it, and as a purchase price? Would there be an opportunity for them to do that prior to it coming to the land bank?
It would have had to go through the tax sale, so they would have had the opportunity at auction to purchase that for the back taxes. The vast majority of our vacant lots that people want from the land bank, they had the opportunity to buy at the tax sale. They chose to come to a cheaper arrangement because you have a much lower price. You're not at the back taxes.
Okay, thank you.
So just so that, and I'm going to reiterate what Commissioner Townsend, I believe, has already said, but you're working right now really just to clean up the data related to all of our properties that are in the land bank, as well as all properties in Wyandotte County. Because as I've certainly seen, there are issues with our records on those properties. And then as you're doing that, you're going to either update or develop new, as needed, the policies and procedures for disposition of property, especially now coming from the land bank. So in general, cleaning up our records of all properties, and certainly, what's it been now, Mr. Slaughter, 4 years that we've been cleaning up City of Kansas City, Kansas, or Board of Commissioners properties?
Yeah, you guys approved that in the end of 14, and I think we started transferring mid 2015, and it's been some time since we brought some of those, but again, I think part of my question has always been are we just supposed to hold these? Do we transfer them back? And those are things, once we started as a group discussing, it kind of was like, well, what about this scenario and what about this scenario? And I think we're trying to just come up with that uniform kind of strategy that says if A equals B, then we're going to do C.
I certainly do think that as I looked at the data prior to that the rough condition of the data suggested that this is long overdue. And so it's good that we're getting this together, and then we'll look forward to policy suggestions and procedure suggestions in terms of how we deal with especially land bank properties moving forward.
I could follow along with your comments. So how far along are we, and when will we be done?
Commissioner, that's a very good question. We're laying out our first year strategies. These are noted up here, and as far as done, some of this could take several years because we are having to actually do abstracting and other types of work on these properties before we're able to kind of put the final disposition into place. Tib, any comments on that?
Melissa's exactly right. On many of these properties, we've got to do the same full abstracting process to track down how they really should be titled and what really should be going on that we have to do to put them through the tax sale. And we only managed to get 2,000 processed into the tax sale in a year. So it's a slow process to work through each one when we find there's a problem. The first step is finding the problem.
The other thing that just to note on this as well is that as we are moving through this work, we're actually going to be, as Commissioner McKiernan stating, formalizing processes and policies so that we all work together, and going forward in the future, there's no question about what to do with the next one, which I think has been part of the problem. Everyone is treated as a new case, and in fact, the case may look like the 5 cases ago, but we're not treating it that way. So it's to put some direct paths out in front of staff so that we are not constantly asking ourselves, what did we do the last time? And making it easier for, again, the communication and the customer service to be clear with folks that are wanting to interact with us on land management matters.
And if I can just add, that was part of the original request last month for the extension on the hold area. From the land bank perspective, I think we're close, but we're just not there, and we didn't feel it was justifiable to come to you with incomplete results or the same recommendation of doing business as usual. So that's why we initially asked for the 90, got granted the 120, and then at the last commission meeting was asked to bring that back, which is further on down in the agenda, so we can have that conversation there. But Melissa's right. It seems like every time we think we're getting to a solution, 3 or 4 more questions or issues pop up that we never thought about, and then it just takes time to do the research and get the answers for that.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from the committee? If not, we appreciate your ongoing work, and we do look forward to updates as they become available. That's going to take us to item number 2 on our committee agenda, and now we're dealing with land bank business, and I believe item 2 is requests for transfers to the land bank. Mr. Slaughter.
I think we should have the lease policy first. Am I mistaken? Then it's tied into the presentation you just had. So we're still just, I guess, on item 1.
Okay, so, all right. We'll ask whoever I need to ask. Let's make sure we get this clarified, because in my agenda, the action requested is information forthcoming. If there's going to be an action item here, I want to know about it ahead of time. And I do not recall getting a blue sheet on this with an update prior to today's meeting.
I guess my question would be, is the policy recommendations in your packet?
No, they are not. We got a copy of the presentation that you just,
And then it went straight into the transfer?
but in my agenda, and other members of the committee, please check me on this. Item number 1, my request for action is information forthcoming, and there is nothing there, and then it goes directly to item number 2, which is transfers to the land bank.
Okay, well, I guess we'll be bringing that back next month.
Okay.
There's no attachment.
There was supposed to be an updated, so I apologize. We didn't
Okay,
realize
so-
it didn't go out.
Yeah, so that now it turns item number 1 into an information item, and then we will just make sure that we've got all the requisite pieces either in the original agenda or by blue sheet before we come to our next committee meeting.
So do you want to go through the changes or just save it for the next meeting?
At this point in time, given the fact that there is no action to take, we'll just ask that you bring those to the next meeting. So that will then move us into transfers to the land bank.
Okay, so now that we're on schedule. So we have 3 transfers tonight: 1824 North 13th Street, 3042 Hiawatha Street, 3044 Hiawatha Street, all currently in the name of the Board of County Commissioners. So the first one here is 1824 North 13th Street, which is located here in black. As you can see, a majority of the block going north is already in land bank. This property here was in the tax sale on Friday. I haven't confirmed it, but I'm pretty sure we're getting that because nobody's really bidding that much for a vacant lot. And then this property here is scheduled for the August tax sale. So the request came because we have new ownership here at 1822 North 13th Street. And the owner came in and visited with us. He's expressed, and he's actually, I think, already started some renovations. He's looking at doing some retail on the bottom, apartments on top. And his request was for this Board of County Commissioner property mainly to, and then with the property in the back, to assist in his parking needs that he'll need. So that's that request. And then the two in green are the two on Hiawatha, and there's an application or applications in place tonight for those properties. So those are the requests for right now to just transfer those to the land bank.
And realistically, regardless of their ultimate disposition, these properties really fall in that group that we just discussed, which should have been in the land bank for years, and we are now getting them there from other ownership status. In this case, the Board of County Commissioners.
Correct, and just to go back to the presentation, those are the type of things that we're starting to look and identify to say, do they need to stay here in this name? Do they need to go to just the unified government's name, or could they go to the land bank and benefit?
Excellent. So we do have the 3 properties that have been submitted for transfer to the land bank. Does the committee have any questions or comments?
Move for approval.
There's a motion and a second to approve these transfers to the land bank as submitted. Any further discussion? Any comment on these 3 items? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye. Those are approved as submitted. Mr. Slaughter, I believe we have some requests for donation now.
Yes, we have 2 donation requests, 3431 Barnett Avenue, Daniel Garcia, 2204 North 12th Street from Shirley Dickinson. 3431 Barnett is the property here outlined in black, and this was the one we visited last month. So again, just to recap, this was on the April 1st agenda. The owners do live out in California. Currently has an $18,000 plus demo lien, and the 2018 taxes are still owed. They claim they weren't notified about the demo. We did, and we did confer with the demo department that they were given proper notice. I, in fact, emailed them copies of signed receipts of delivery, which they have admitted in email that yes, they did receive those. But again, they're saying that they can no longer take care of the property. And then just for the other one, then we can go to discussion. This is Ms. Dickinson's request. It's outlined here in green, 2204 North 12th. This property, again, was demoed in 2018. There's over a $19,000 lien. Some taxes have been paid since 2007, but the farthest back taxes was in 2007. And again, she states that she cannot maintain the property.
So I'm the one who asked you to bring back the 3431 Barnett for this time, and as I look back on it, it doesn't really matter. I disagree. I mean, I'm sure the property owner's not here, living in California. They paid the taxes every year on it, but they didn't take care of the property, and that's why the property deteriorated to the point that it required demolition. And now they're going to walk away from the lien that they owe, just like they walked away from that property. And as I think about it, it's like, oh, goodness gracious, we're going to end up spending more money on legal fees to try to collect that demo lien than if we just take the property into the land bank and forget about that. And it really bothers me greatly when we do this, because it's all the rest of us who pick up the slack when somebody walks away from something that from a bill that they incurred that we are going to pay. But as I think about it now, the path of least resistance is we will simply acquire the property, we will abate the back taxes, we will effectively forgive the lien, and it will then become available to us for some future land bank action down the road. So although I'm really frustrated that we can't reach out to this person and say, no, you owe us for tearing down the house. I guess I'm being kind of fatalistic and saying, let's just take the transfer, the donation into the land bank. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Well, I feel as you do, Commissioner, because it just sets a dangerous precedent. I'd like to know from legal or from our staff what our options are, even though, as you say, we're going to incur some more. What if this becomes the thing that opens the floodgate and everybody who wants to walk away from a demolition, I'd rather see us spend a little bit more money and defend it. Maybe we won't get all of it, but something, than just saying, okay, we'll take it in. I mean, that could be the beginning of a landslide of.
It could be, but the one thing that crosses my mind is you do forfeit your property if you walk away. So, Wendy Green.
Good evening, Commissioners. Unfortunately, when we put a special assessment on the property for demo costs, they follow the land, not the owner. So even if we were to try to collect, it's an in rem action. Our only recourse is to collect against the property and not the individual owners. So they would be in essence walking away, but we can't make that lien follow them. It has to stay with the property. So even though we'd like to try to collect it against them, our method of collecting it per the statutes is to put it on the property and collect it against the property.
Thank you, Counselor. Another question. If they've paid taxes, then there's no, well, let me ask it another way. Is there an option to putting something like this in a tax sale?
Absolutely. Special assessments become like taxes, and you collect on them the same way you do past due taxes. So if the land bank doesn't take this property, then what will happen is it will end up going into a tax sale as soon as that assessment has become ripe, so to speak, and so as the property is delinquent per statutes where we can try to collect on it by putting it in a tax sale. So that's exactly what's going to end up happening is if the land bank doesn't take it in, it will go in the tax sale where most likely no one's going to spend over $20,000 on a vacant lot, and then it'll end up going into the land bank anyway.
But they might spend something.
Well, they'd have to spend at least what the special assessments are, though.
Okay.
That's what our minimum bid starts at, is the total amount of the past due taxes plus special assessments.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's where I become fairly Eeyore-ish here. In the 3 years the 3 more years that it's going to take before this would go into the tax sale, it's going to lie fallow. I'm going to predict that the owner who didn't take care of the house will not take care of the property. So we'll end up cutting the grass and weeds for the next 3 years, incurring those costs. And I think my position would be if we're going to incur those costs, we might as well own the property. And have the ability, should someone come forward and say, I want to do something with that, have the ability to say yes today and not 3 years from now. So that's why I would be inclined to accept the donation as much as it annoys me. Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept these donations as submitted. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
One more thing. How long would we have to hold this before it could go? Well, I don't mean hold it, but what would be the first time that this could go into a tax sale?
I would have to look and see, on the one that owes taxes for 2007, we could put it in our December sale
Of this year?
of this year. On the other one, I would have to see how far back the taxes go, or if it's just a special assessment and the taxes, 2018, it would still be, it would become ripe in 2019 to start the clock. Since it's not a residential property, it'd be 2 years, so it would be 2021 before we could put it in a tax sale.
Okay. And I was really referring to the Barnett property.
It would be 2021, fall of 2021, before it could go in a tax sale.
Okay. And on the North 12th Street property, what is owed on that? Is that that's a special assessment too, was raised? Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, was that motion only on one property or both?
No, that motion is for both of the donations as submitted.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to accept these donations as submitted. Any further comments? Any other comments from the group? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters,
Aye.
Murgia, Townsend,
I'm sorry, I just can't, no.
Burrows,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. That vote then is 3-1. That item, check me on this, does not pass.
Correct.
And so this committee has, at least for this meeting, not accepted those donations. And if the land bank wants to bring those donations back, can do so at a future meeting.
I will add, generally what we do, if something is denied that is eligible, we go ahead and make the recommendation to the delinquent real estate department. So I will probably end up making that recommendation on the 12th Street property anyway. Or, you know, I can bring them back.
Mr. Slaughter, that'll be up to you and your colleagues. So those donations have been denied, and then you can dispose of those as you see best. And if that means bringing it back to this committee, so be it. That moves us ahead to item number 4.
And we would actually request, so that we can look at both the Northeast Hold area and the applications for the Northeast Hold area back to back, if we could actually take item 5 first, if you wouldn't.
I wondered when I saw the agenda if that might not be a better way to do it. So with the permission of the committee, we will now consider item number 5, which is land bank applications exclusive of the hold area. All right, we're good to go on.
Okay, and just for clarification, these are applications that we've worked up that have not been in the Northeast Hold area. We have 6 applications tonight. 2 are yard extensions, 4 are property acquisitions. All applicants are current on their taxes and have no current code violations. The first one is 113 South Cherokee Street. The applicant lives at 119 South Cherokee. We have property acquisitions for the 2 here in red: 3313 Strong Avenue, 1419 South 32nd. This is for Vida Enterprise LLC out of Kansas City, Missouri. They're proposing a food truck park, and they've shared some renderings of what they would hope to make this property into. They have been conversing with our planning department, and as far as I have heard, there really is no immediate objections if this was the route we're going. The next one is 1213 Gilmore. The applicant, Denise Olia, is here at 1201. And then we have 14141 Minnesota from Mr. Aranjo, and he lives in Olathe. He has an agricultural project in mind. I did reach out to the city of Bonner and did receive correspondence from, I'm sorry about this. From Rachel Klein, the Community and Economic Development Department, and they have no objections to any kind of approval on this project. And then the last one is a property acquisition of 617 South 11th, with the applicant being 615 South 11th. And those are the requests of those non-hold area applications.
And so for those that are property acquisitions as opposed to yard extensions, and that would be 4 of the 6, your department is comfortable with the property acquisitions as they've been presented?
As we stand currently today, based on the current policy and practices, yes.
Okay, Commissioner Burrows and then Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I want to talk about the property, the 14141 Minnesota Avenue. I noticed that's all road frontage through there. The entire lot is a long lot that runs all through the road frontage. Are there utilities already on that property, do we know?
I am unaware of that, Commissioner. I can find that out for you.
Do we know the size of the lot, the acreage? Is it a large amount of acreage?
Yeah, I have that here. It's 1.16 acres.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Townsend? Oh, all right. I do have a question on the South 11th property. And so, as a matter of fact, that's this one right here. So the applicant already owns 615 and wants to acquire 617
Correct.
to have the entirety of that vacant lot.
Yes.
And the applicant will maintain the entirety of that vacant lot.
That was the driving factor in his application.
Does the applicant live nearby?
Yes, he lives at 1029 Kansas Avenue.
That's kind of nearby. Yeah, but if he's at, he'd be
If I
just,
remember right, I believe
he'd be
it's
just around the corner.
one of these
Yeah,
houses
he's
here.
right over in there. So that's right down the street from Bill Clem Park, isn't it?
I believe that's
Bill Clem
here
on
to
the
the
park.
east.
Yeah, that's Bill Clem right there. So this goes back, doesn't affect anything other than just kind of my personal bias on this. I would sure like to see one of our lots be acquired for the purpose of development, and maybe these will someday. But you know what? Right now, if we can get another partner who will help us take care of another lot that's in close proximity to Bill Clem Park, where Kaboom and a whole bunch of other community partners are going to come together and put a playground later this summer, then you know what? I'll take that community partner and thank him for his service. All right, that's the only question I have on that. And then I just want to know, have you checked with Commissioner Murguia on the ones that are located along 32nd and along Strong?
I have not heard from her. We did play phone tag last Friday, but I've not spoken with her.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Entertain a motion on these applications.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve these 6 applications as submitted. Any further discussion? Any comments on any of these properties? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye. Those 6 applications have been approved as submitted. If any of you are here with us tonight, you can follow up with Mr. Slaughter after the meeting, and he will share with you what the next steps are in the process. All right, so now we'll double back to what was originally item number 4 and then number 6, so the hold area and the applications for that.
Okay, so this discussion is back before this committee based on the direction at the April 11th Board of Trustees meeting or full commission meeting. So again, the history of this original request was to hold it, everything in this area on hold for 180 days. And this basically applied to any yard extensions or property acquisitions. Since when we had that, anybody that applied they were sent a letter that stated that it's currently on hold. This is not a denial, it's just we're currently holding it for future recommendations. Anything that was for any kind of development, single-fill housing would have been worked as business as usual. We did not receive any in that 180 days. And then we would come back with a recommendation, like we kind of mentioned at the first presentation of the night, with some strategies. And again, a lot of this was based on when we passed this was right before the approval of the Northeast Master Plan. Again, we're seeing a lot of inquiries on property in that area for development, also some that may be speculative in nature, and that's what the whole request was being. So again, just as I mentioned on the 11th, since the 180 days started, we have formed a land bank advisory staff team. This is a team that I feel will be very instrumental on answering a lot of these questions and making recommendations on whether we bring them to you guys for approval. Of course, you've met most of the land asset management team. Again, progress is being made. We just did not get to that finish line. So originally we asked for a 90-day extension. It was added to make that a 120-day extension. That was the request we brought to the April 11th commission meeting. And if it was granted, we would then follow up with another letter just letting everybody know that there would still just be a little more time and their patience would be appreciated. And again, that's kind of why we're talking tonight.
Turn this back on here. So we have attached to our number 4, the request for action is approve the requests. And I want to clarify what the request for action is here.
We're again requesting another 120 days.
Commissioner Townsend.
Okay, with this request, I'm a bit confused because this committee had earlier made its recommendation onto the full board. So my understanding was, as of that April meeting of the full board as acting as the land bank trustees, that the community, there were certain persons in the community that wanted the opportunity to meet with the land bank again. So I don't see that there's anything for this committee to do. It's my understanding that for various reasons, that requested meeting with your office and others who may want to participate has not happened.
That is correct. We had a scheduling conflict with one of the speakers who couldn't make it this week. We did have one that said that he was very flexible and could meet. We had one group that I have not heard back from. Okay. And we did receive, we was asked to see if anybody wanted to sign up or give their contact information after the meeting. I got one person did come up and left me their number, and I did call last Friday and explain the situation, and she was acceptable with that. And when we did, or if we did meet, I would contact her again and invite her to that meeting.
Well, based on that, I would, if this requires some type of action, recommend that the neighborhood partners and you, those who wanted to participate, be given that opportunity to do. There's nothing for this body, as I understand, to do on this, because the full board really, it's in their lap to act. So that's what I would, recommend as to this, if any action needs to be. It seems like the action that's still pending was the direction given by the full board back at that April meeting.
Okay, so
if a motion is needed for that, I so move.
Okay, so let's clarify the motion. The motion is to?
The motion is to have Mr. Slaughter meet with the community partners that wanted to be involved so that the real feedback could be given to the full board of commissioners sitting as the land bank trustees, because that matter is going to go back to them next month sometime. So there's nothing for this body to do. That's my understanding.
So our understanding of the purpose of that meeting was actually to discuss the potential policy changes and not the hold, but that, because the whole point of the hold was so that we could move forward with the policy changes. and come back with a nice holistic policy rather than kind of a piecemeal. But maybe we misunderstood.
Well, that's what was before the full board. Last month, this committee had said, yes, we agree with the whole. That was our recommendation. But that was not what happened at the full board. And that's where the motion, I think Commissioner McCarron and I seconded, arose, recommending that the partners, community partners, had the opportunity to meet before the full board went further on whether there was a hold or not.
So if I can clarify, and hindsight's always 20/20 on the motions we make sometimes. But if I can clarify, I think what I hear you're saying is that from your perspective, this committee has acted and made its recommendation to the Land Bank Board of Trustees, and that recommendation is to extend the hold by 180 days. Well, 120, I'm sorry, 120 days. That was brought to us as 90, extended to 120. And that is still the recommendation of this committee back to the full Land Bank Board of Trustees, which is effectively the full commission, and that
there was a request back at the April meeting mentioned for community partners to meet with Mr. Slaughter to discuss that and to clarify any issues. And then it was going to come back to the full board. So I don't know that we even need action on this.
I believe though it was sent back, the extension was denied. The extension on the board was denied.
And I don't believe there was a vote.
No.
not,
Well, it expired, excuse me, it expired.
The 180 days expired this past Saturday.
So I think it would have to be sent back at that portion.
Well, I recollect that there was still a vote taken by the full body for that meeting to take place. That hasn't happened, so I would,
what I hear Angie saying is that by virtue of the vote that we took, we allowed the 180 to expire without the confirmation of the 120 extension.
And I agree with you that the direction was given and the meeting was to take place. But in order for this to go, for the extension to go back up, because it's now expired, there have to be a vote taken to send it back. Whether that's done at this.
Well, I understand yes, we've sort of got a motion on the floor.
Right.
When the time is right, I'll be glad to make a motion that we extend the hold for another 120 days retroactive to April 27th, when the time is right, Mr. Chairman.
And I think that's actually where Commissioner Townsend was going with this. She was just assuming that it was still in place, but it would require, as I understand it, your motion would be that this committee recommends again to the Land Bank Board of Trustees that the hold be extended 120 days, retroactive back to our original decision date on that, and that any other business be conducted and then brought to the full Land Bank Board of Trustees.
well, let me withdraw my motion, just to clarify it. And as Commissioner Walters has said, I would, if he makes the motion, I'll second it with the addition of the community partners having the opportunity to have that meeting before the next full board meets to discuss whatever concerns they have about that. That's what was supposed to have happened. That was my understanding from the last Board of Commissioners meeting, so.
And so Commissioner Walters has accepted that amendment. Commissioner Burrows?
Point of clarification, the next Board of Trustees meeting for the Land Bank will be the May 9th. Will you have time to get the neighborhood groups input at that?
I think I'm just gonna have to set a date, invite everybody, and I'll report who shows, who doesn't, and then the comments that are made.
I think that's the real holdup is with the full commission. listen to the community for an opportunity for them to visit with the land bank staff and to work out any details. And until that time, the moratorium, we thought would stay in place, the 120 days. And now we're hearing the 180 days expired, and the fact that we sent this back, the 120 days, was not accepted. We had voted to send it back to staff. So I'm just trying to get a little clarification.
I think what you said, I agree.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second to extend the hold 120 days, retroactive to the date that we originally set it to extend from, and that before Mr. Slaughter comes back to the Land Bank Board of Trustees, that he engages those community partners who wish to engage regarding their properties in the hold area, and then bring all of that back to the Land Bank Board of Trustees. Did I capture that correctly? All right, that is the motion and the second that is before us. Any further discussion? Any comment? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye. And then effectively, that takes care of what was item number 6 on our original agenda, because it's the second part of that motion. And then that should take us up to the land bank rehab program. Is that correct?
Angie, is that how you interpret it?
I don't think it takes, I think it's a separate action because the hold, although you recommended the hold, it's not in place.
Okay.
So you could move to delay action on these items.
So actually take formal action. Okay. So there are applications then that are before us, and to be consistent with our previous decision, it has been suggested that we could make a motion to delay action on those until.
So moved.
Second.
So there's a motion and a second to delay action on all of the properties under the item number 6 applications, hold area, and then to deal with those at such time as the entire matter comes back to the Land Bank Board of Trustees.
After the entire matter.
Correct. Correct. So after the entire matter goes back to the Land Bank Board of Trustees, these properties will be dealt with at that time. Any further discussion among the committee? Yes, ma'am. So we've got Commissioner Townsend, then Commissioner Burrows.
Just wanted to have some information brought back, though, and I am curious as to the date of the application on a couple of these properties that were, I can't see it. I thought I saw some on Everett.
Are you referring to the struggler seal applications?
Right. I'm
Those-
curious as to when.
September 17th of last year.
Did that precede the first hold?
Yes.
The application.
The application did? Well, with respect to those two, since, and does that community group, is my understanding they have been working those applications or that property prior to the holds?
Yes, they've had a community garden there for some time.
Okay. Have we already taken the vote on the other?
We have not taken the vote, and so we still have opportunity.
Okay, here's what I would like to see, since the applications on those two, I still support the motion as it was, but since But since those two applications have been worked by that group and they made application prior to the hold and have expressed a desire to continue working those and to take title, I'd like to see a separate vote on those.
If we're being consistent, there are some others that also preceded the hold their applications.
How many?
17.
17? Well, never mind. Well,
Where the applications may have preceded the hold, but was requested action by this committee prior to the hold?
I don't recall the date that we presented that in November. Or actually, I think it was October 29th is when we presented this, based on the feeling of some speculative applications that came before you. And that's where we requested the hold. And that hold would have been, and I just don't know when that November date would have been.
Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. I know the motion was made and seconded, but I want to make sure that we have an understanding of the motion. We chose at this time to extend the moratorium for 120 days. So if we're extending the moratorium for 120 days, the applications themselves would be a moot point at this time.
Right, except it would take the land bank, the Board of Trustees, to finalize the moratorium.
okay.
The moratorium is not in effect after the last vote. It's now moving up to the land bank Board of Trustees.
Well, the motion was made to make it retroactive. That was the motion.
Right.
So
But now it advances to the Board of Trustees.
Okay.
under the condition that the moratorium stays in place until the staff has had a chance to meet with those individuals that are listed with these properties. So if that's the case, and it would be my understanding there's no other action necessary.
Okay, I understand.
Well, but I think what she was saying earlier was that even though we have made that recommendation to the Board of Trustees, the Board of Trustees hasn't accepted it yet. So we're kind of in limbo right now. The moratorium has expired.
Right.
And so my motion was to hold on these parcels pending resolution at the Board of Trustees meeting, May 9th. And we'll take care of these issues after that meeting.
And you had made the second, and
I understand now. I was under the impression that maybe these were the only two that predated it, to be consistent. But I think that's why it's so important to move forward and have that community meeting. I do understand that Strugglers Hill still has access to those properties. So they wouldn't be harmed that way. So thank you.
so there is a motion and a second. Now, in this case, to defer action until action on the hold is taken. Any further discussion among the committee? Any comment? Sir, I see a hand in the back. If you would please come to the podium in the middle of the room, and I do see the green light is on, so that microphone is live. If you just give us your name and your city of residence for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to make your comment.
Okay, Roselle Nunn in here in Kansas City. The property that I'm speaking of is 701 Parallel. And this is my question, I guess I'm looking around the room and a lot of people have the same look on their face. At this point, we've already waited 180 days in a hold. So from last September, we're gonna talk about another 120 days. That makes it almost a year. So if we're saying that as the land bank wants to take care of properties, you're telling people 35 applicants that have waited almost a year, well, we'll just wait some more, that have waited over 6 months now, you'll just wait almost a year. And at that point, we still don't know what moves forward. I can say us at 701 Parallel, I'll use something that you said. Earlier, you said, Mr. McKiernan, that if you're maintaining a property, why not own it? We have been maintaining this property at 701 Parallel for 10 years. We didn't even know that owning it was an option. We thought someone else owned it, but we just maintained it. We've cut the grass. We take care of the lot. In fact, last month we just went through, we re-tilled the whole lot, planted seeds, and are growing grass back on the whole lot where the lot didn't have grass at. So that brings me to, if we're maintaining something, why not own it? But I can say that, in my opinion, and if you look around this room, there are a lot of people that are going to be upset here in a couple seconds if y'all go through with this motion to extend this by another 120 days. They may not have said that because they didn't realize you guys were out when you said comments. Just for future references, you might want to say that that's comments for the crowd, because a lot of people didn't realize it was their turn to speak yet. So what I would say, and like my only saying, is that for 10 years we've maintained the property. I can't speak to how long some of these other people have maintained the properties that they're applying for, if they've maintained them at all, but an additional 120 days brings you almost to a year of waiting for a property. And I can tell you, in my instance, we've gotten tickets for parking or being up on this property, but we've maintained it for 10 years. So it now impedes us because we're utilizing property that we've maintained.
I appreciate your comment, and let me make sure that I understand where we're going with this, that we effectively are going to go back and look at all of these properties that are in the hold area more closely to see if there are special circumstances, extenuating cases, whatever it might be, that would call for those to be moved even with the hold still in place. Is that my understanding? Do I understand that correctly?
I think the bulk of what we'd be looking at here is the lease program that didn't make it onto tonight's agenda. And I do apologize. There was an error somewhere in transmission because there was a big change to the agenda as it was submitted back at our agenda review. So with that being said, that would be the direction many of these would be going, is for a lease. And then eventually, maybe at some point in time, they would have the opportunity to buy them if we determined that that was the best way to handle it, meaning we, the commission.
Commissioner Burrows.
This moratorium doesn't preclude them from continuing to have a community garden or doing whatever was necessary, or that whatever you were doing to the property before. This moratorium doesn't preclude you from continuing to utilize that property for such.
But they've ticketed us for even having anything on the property. They actually put the police came by and put tickets on our vehicles that were there for having vehicles on the property. So it is, the hold does preclude something.
Let me get a little clarification. Vehicles on the property with parked there?
So it's that's what they said. We have there's a parking area, a parking strip from where the house, there used to be a house there. The rest of the land is open, vacant. I don't have any pictures with me, but there's a parking to the far right of the property. And we always have, for the last 10 years, parked in the exact same place. Starting here recently, we've been getting little orange tickets on our vehicles if we park in that place. So this hold something has changed, because we were not previously having any issues on the property we were maintaining, and now we are. So before, and that's kind of what kicked us in the rear, that says, hey, maybe there's something you can do. That's what taught us that we could buy the property, is because we're getting ticketed now, and that's an issue for a property that we've been maintaining. So this hold does affect us in some way.
I just want to clarify, because I'm looking at the property right now, and looks like it's all grass.
To the far right side, it may look like grass, but it's not. There's concrete. We actually had to bust it up to even try to
the remnants of an old asphalt driveway apron and a brick driveway.
The brick driveway may be to the right, the far right side.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. It's, boy, it is. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might suggest
Absolutely.
that as they if the neighborhood groups come forward to the staff, that we might want to include the police chief or the police department to find out why there's citations occurring, and that while these are with a moratorium, to be mindful that the properties are still in use by these organizations. Maybe that would help to send a message that we're trying to be good partners here while we determine what we're going to do with the master plan and what we're going to do with the land bank properties. That if there's citations being issued, I can't answer as to why they're being issued. And I don't think a member of this committee would try to usurp the law enforcement's authority, but I really think it would be important if there's questions in reference that the police department might offer. I would suggest that maybe we reach out to them and find out if this is occurring.
You know, Commissioner, the only thing I can add is, you know, code enforcement will periodically contact me that there is cars being parked there, there's debris, there's properties that need to be mowed. We've had one instance where 3 lots, somebody fenced in. And unless the land bank has given those people permission to do that, we generally request that to go ahead and take action as per the codes, or sometimes I will send a letter to that address saying we didn't give you permission, please stop what you're doing. And on the other side, I do appreciate it when our constituents come to me and say, I've been taking care of our property, because that is a help to us. But, you know, without really trying to be the bad guy here tonight, I mean, there's so many properties out there that we just can't keep our eye on every single day. But I know we would have never in this situation given permission to let someone park on it.
Understood.
Thank you. Mr. Nunn, I'd like to thank you for doing what you thought was appropriate to make the neighborhood look better. Having said that, you were probably aware it wasn't, you know, your property, but I appreciate what you've undertaken. I do the same thing on the property around me. But I believe from what I've heard, what you're running into has nothing to do with this whole process at all. Now, I would be interested, sounds like I'm your in-district commissioner, to know what the nature of those citations are, because we have a lot of problems in the Northeast end with people parking on unimproved surfaces. And that might be why you received a ticket. I don't know, but that might be why, which again underscores that that would have nothing to do with this process.
Understood.
So I'd appreciate if you call the office, and I'd like to talk to you about those. Not saying I can do anything about them.
No, understood completely. I understand that completely.
But I appreciate what you've done to improve the look of that.
Okay.
But as you've heard here earlier, we are trying to be strategic. We're going where we haven't gone before to make sure that as we look, particularly at the Northeast area, we're not having people gouge land. So those developers come, they're exorbitant prices, ask for bare lots. So I would just ask that you and others bear with us. I would say I wouldn't support a third hole, that's for sure. So we got this, asking for this last time to get it right. You've heard the presentation. This is an overall bigger plan. So,
Understood.
But thank you, and I look forward to your call. 913-573-5040.
Commissioner, actually, one of my assistants out here, Tib Laughlin, will get with him to give him some information so we can run that down as well.
Fantastic. Any other comment? Sir.
Terrell Dyer, Kansas City, Kansas. I just wanted a clarification on the notion that you just had, and also as far as the meeting with the Board of Trustees and over the hold on the land and applications. I would just want to get a clarification is those applications that was put in for the Northeast area that has the hold on it, are you guys saying that those applications with the extended other 90 days are null and void for right now? Because to my understanding to that meeting with the Board of Trustees on the 11th was that applications through the Board of Trustees was able to get pushed through or looked at more with a broader lens if it went along with the Northeast Master Plan and certain things that the land bank was looking for to use the property for.
My understanding would be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that we are delaying action on these until we have such time as to have the meetings that we had hoped to have had when we discussed this at the full commission and board of trustees meeting.
Okay.
And that the time has been too short to have had meetings and to examine individual properties to see if there are extenuating circumstances that would lend them to be removed from the hold area, even if the hold area stays in place.
Thank you. I just want clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? So the motion is to delay action on these until such time as it comes back to the Land Bank Board of Trustees. And that is the second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Okay, the last item we have tonight is update on the rehab program. I was hoping to have another house to show tonight, but we had to cancel that appointment today, and it'll be tomorrow, so it'll be on next month. So we'll just go over the statistics. Number of houses in the land bank from the tax sale, that was just Friday. It is our indication that we're slated to get 8 properties. Doesn't necessarily mean we'll get 8. Some people may petition the court to challenge the sale and that kind of stuff. So we continue to grow the number of contractors in there. We are currently up to 129 contractors. And with that, we've had a decrease in the total number of houses in the program, and it's currently sitting at 87, and hopefully after tomorrow it'll be down to 86. The houses with no offers, with the increase of new people in the program, has also declined. We're down to 20 houses. The demos complete have stayed the same. We're still sitting at 30. The houses recommended for demo has gone up to 13. The ones we received from the December sale were pretty much, we did not receive offers on, and it's our recommendation that they be torn down. Number of rehabs started is at 44. And we're still waiting. We have 9 that we're waiting to close. I have 6 just sitting there waiting for the guy to go sign the papers, and so hopefully that'll be immensely down next time. The number of completed rehabs is 30. I was hoping 31, but that will go up next month. And the house that we've been dealing with from an eviction standpoint, I believe Friday there was a hearing, and I believe the judge has given the owner an opportunity, as long as the back taxes are paid, that she will retain ownership. It's my understanding and legal's understanding that her attorney has the funds to do that. So once it's officially completed through the courts, it'll no longer be in our inventory. So hopefully you guys received an email about the house on 55th Street that we reported on last month. There is an open house on May 16th from 11:30 to 1:30, 3817 North 55th. You can't miss it. It's a great opportunity to go in and see the work that's been done. For those out there that maybe this is recalling something, this was an old Knights of Columbus hall. This was a daycare before it was in the tax sale and come to us. So if anybody can make it, we definitely recommend going and seeing some of the fine work some of our rehabbers are doing. So that's all I have tonight.
As always, thank you, sir. That brings us to the end of Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee meeting. Once again, those applications to the land bank that are outside of the hold area were all approved as submitted, and all the applications in the hold area have had action delayed until the next Board of Commissioners meeting. So with no further business before us, this committee is adjourned. We'll allow time for BPU Board Member Bryant to come up to the table, and then we'll reconvene Economic Development and Finance.
This evening. So with that, I'll go ahead and we'll call the meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into the microphone. At this time, would the clerk please call roll?
Roll call. Burrows,
Here.
McKiernan,
Here?
Townsend,
Here.
Margia, Walters, Bryant,
Here. Next order of business is approval of minutes. I'd entertain a motion of approval for our March 4th minutes.
So moved?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, motion passes, minutes have been approved. The committee agenda this evening, we have 5 items on the agenda. Item 1 is a resolution to the Second Amendment to the Legends West Lawn Development Agreement. Catherine Carter is our Director of Economic Development, and she is here to make her presentation. So, Catherine, Ms. Carter.
Thank you very much. Catherine Carter, Director of Economic Development. This is a resolution adopting a Second Amendment to the Legends West Lawn Development Agreement. We had come before you back in January to ask for a bit of an extension, and then I believe you were all aware of the horrendous weather we had this fine winter, which put a pretty big damper on construction moving forward. So the Legends folks have requested a extension to June 30th, And I would like to kind of quickly show you kind of where this is the kind of what the final process will look like, but did want to assure you that things are moving along. As you can see, this is just taken today. So there is lots of construction going. They are moving fast and furiously, and hope to certainly exceed the June 30th date that we're requesting the extension for. Also, Mark Sherwin here is from the Legends and is here to answer any questions you have about the progress, as well as what the final product will look like.
Anyone have any questions? I will state that Commissioner Walters and myself went out and visited the site and had a meeting, and I do see that additional construction has occurred since our meeting just 10 days ago.
Yes.
So the weather has been a tremendous factor, and I see the pool that you're putting in.
Yeah, you can tell that was today.
Yeah, we've got some weather coming in we have some weather that's coming in this week that's going to put a damper on some things, but we're working through it. I'm meeting with our contractor. We got on-site supervision, but I try to be at the project as many as 2 to 3 times during the week, because, you know, even with the horrendous weather, we still got our work cut out for us, and I want to make sure that we stay on track and meet our commitment.
Great. Does any of the members have any questions, comments? Seeing none, does anyone from the public have anything to state in reference to this project? Seeing none, do you believe the time frame is concise enough for you to meet the deadline?
Yeah.
Despite the monsoon?
Despite the monsoon. You know, of course, you know, we all can't predict Mother Nature, but as long as we don't continue to have, you know, weeks of rain like we're going to have this week, I don't see a problem in that. But we're pushing ahead and trying to push to get more crews out there as well.
Great. Well, thank you for your due diligence and seeing the project done on time. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Bryant.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All done.
Item number 2 is a resolution to the Turner Logistics Development Agreement. And Ms. Carter, our economic development person, is here, still present, to make her comments.
Thank you.
Carter, the floor is yours.
Catherine Carter, again, Economic Development. I'm going to ask Brent Miles from North Point to come up, and we're going to give you a little presentation of a project that we're really excited about at Turner Diagonal, and just kind of give you some updates of where we are and some specifics about this project and development agreement that we hope to have approved.
Good evening. There we go. Better evening, I guess. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brent Miles with North Point Development. It's a pleasure to be back before you. We've been excited about this project for some time. It's been a roller coaster. We were denied multiple times federal funds, and a lot of hard work and determination and probably some luck, I guess, and we've pulled it off. And so tonight is, as I've been joking with Catherine, we're almost to the starting line. So for many of you know us, we've obviously did the redevelopment of the former GM plant in Fairfax. We did the redevelopment of the public levee in the Fairfax district. Commissioner Townsend, I think you and I toured that one multiple times. We were set for a logistics park in this area, and that ultimately became a land sale to Amazon. As many of you may remember, we had bought the land for Amazon from Country Club Bank out of foreclosure. It was a failed residential development, and those of you who've heard me say it multiple times, it took me a lot of work to get it. I didn't want to sell it, but when Amazon came along with 4,000 jobs, as you know, I have a near and dear place in my heart for this community. And so we sold the land that became Amazon and immediately began purchasing land to the north of that, north of I-70. And we didn't have an interchange, and so we did it a little bit backwards, bought land without infrastructure, and then fought really hard to get the federal grant and great match with the unified government and KDOT. So a little bit about us. Many of you know me, but since our inception, we were started about 8 years ago, which is when I left here from Wyandotte County. We've grown up a little bit. We're the second largest industrial landlord in the United States. We have 62 million square feet that we own in 15 states, and we have about 164 industrial clients across the country. I wake up and I don't even believe it myself. We're the largest landlord to General Motors across the United States, largest landlord to Chewy.com, Adidas, Patagonia, Caterpillar. You can see the list of clients there, but we go build a building and lease it and do a good job and be honest and then go do it again. I think the reason that I put this up here specifically is having a national developer with this park, we would be reaching out to our whole list of 164 customers from across the U.S. and say, if you're thinking about Kansas City, here's a new park that you may not know is coming online. And I think that this park, from the logistics and labor standpoint, could really hit the niche for a lot of these companies that are looking for new homes and second homes and third homes. So we're excited about the project. Many of you know, again, I just use the simple terms. The Spaghetti Bowl is what I call the existing Turner infrastructure that's there now. And then with the new federal grant, that becomes a clean, diverging diamond interchange. So all of that existing infrastructure and spaghetti will go away. That was obviously historically related to the toll system. And many of you who grew up here know the history of that and when it moved, and it kept moving west. So we're pleased that this is going to be coming out. We've got new infrastructure going in. Obviously, you can see the Amazon aerial there, but there's our plan. It's about a $150 million investment from us. That doesn't count what the tenants put inside the building, so much greater than $155 million. We're conservative, we think, with our estimates on permanent jobs at 1,800 permanent jobs. That would obviously include more than that with construction jobs. And then the infrastructure, you're right around $30 to $32 million with the federal grant, the KDOT match, and then Catherine will talk about the UG portion and how we're repaying that over time to meet the local match here as well. The park is about 2 million square feet. We estimate that it'll take somewhere between 5 and 7 years to build out. Again, having an intimate knowledge of this community, I can only think of a few projects, maybe others can correct me. I'd say east of probably 78th Street, this large KU Med, GM, obviously Amazon sitting right here. But this would be in probably the top 4 or 5. There would probably be those who debate me, but this is in the highly distressed census tract. I consider it urban. You'll see that here in some slides that I have. But this is a significant capital investment and job creator for this area. Those of you who have driven by Cop Point, you know what these buildings look like. These are what I call institutional grade Class A concrete tilt buildings. These are pictures taken from Riverside Horizons, which is a similar sized park that we have on the Missouri side. These are out at LPKC with Logistics Park. These are much bigger buildings than what we propose here at Turner. Obviously, you have a policy that rewards, there's a bonus provisions in your policy. Obviously, we're hitting the capital investment of above $50 million. We've blown past that. This is in a highly distressed census tract. We've agreed to the maximum bonus for the local minority women, which we've had a great track record in Wyandotte County with all our projects from the apartments at Village West down into our redevelopment projects in Fairfax. And then we're meeting the environmental design, sustainability development criteria as well. This is important to me. We think Turner has everybody says in our world it doesn't have a good labor score. And a good labor score means availability. And I think you've probably heard some updates from Greg at Kendall and his group about Amazon, local hire, total number of jobs, total number of applicants to jobs. But I thought this was an interesting stat for us, which was that 5, 10, and 20-minute drive, just the census tracts around us and the industrial workforce, unemployment, underemployment. I think Amazon's sitting right around 750 local employees is what Greg had mentioned to me. So if you think about that 10-minute drive and what we could potentially do with our project, obviously our project's going to affect those with manufacturing will pay higher, but let's say even on the low scale, you're talking about wages probably in that $14 to $18 an hour job. Again, personally, knowing the community, there's a lot of folks who are working 2 part-time jobs, working fast food, underemployed, maybe trying to be students as well. So that's a real niche for a lot of these jobs here, which is if you can go from $8 to $18 an hour, what impact does that have on your home, on your education, on your house? I'll share these. I don't want to waste more of your time with this, but I think it was interesting. We sit in a really unique place of where we're at with the 2 at-large districts. Obviously, we know the boundaries of those, but really how, if you look at that 5, 10, and 15, 20-minute rings, how it really affects almost all districts in terms of who are folks from Wyandotte County who are going to be working in these facilities. So we're sitting really at the epicenter of great transportation. Obviously, you and the Transit Authority, or whatever you want to call it, have made great strides for the bus transit system, which will obviously we'll be able to take advantage of here with this site. I think one other thing is how it plays into the community college. We'll have a lot of people sitting here that will need training and trying to complete their degree with these jobs. So again, we can share these and go in depth. I'd be happy to meet with each one of you, but we've run a lot of labor and data statistics on each one of your districts and kind of what we think our impact will be in terms of jobs and what that means. Obviously, we're a big believer in one of the best social programs is a job and pride and what that means. So, and then maybe talk a little bit about the infrastructure. So why we're here tonight, and Catherine can talk about this a little bit in her deal points, is we're waiting on that commitment from the UG so that we can get the federal funding in place. When I say that I had lost hope, I've been to DC 5 or 6 times, literally lobbying and lobbying and lobbying for this interchange, and I just did not think it was going to happen. I won't share any more political views, but I just didn't think it was going to happen. And to get the award was honestly in my career one of my top 5 days of my whole career when I got the call that said, we've got the award. It was really surprising to me. I did not know what we were going to do. So timeline-wise is that we'll be working directly with UG and KDOT so that we'll time the opening of the first building with the opening of the interchange so that when that thing is open, our building will be ready. We'll start marketing and prospecting first thing this summer and into the winter so that we're already trying to fill companies for building 1, and hopefully we've got enough traction that maybe we're doing more than one or two buildings right off the start for when that interchange opens. Catherine, these are your slides. I'll let you go next, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions from our standpoint.
I get the fun dry part. It has all the pretty slides, and I just have the deal points.
The words.
Yeah. So what we are doing tonight is requesting a resolution to adopt and authorize the approval of the development agreement for the Turner Logistics Center. So just to go over kind of what that means in terms of how we are making this deal happen. We're looking at industrial revenue bonds, so that would be 100% abatement of the ad valorem property tax for each building for 10 years. However, I want to be clear what that means. We will also, though, have a payment in lieu of taxes. So it is, while it is 100% abatement, then North Point will be paying a per square foot tax, basically. I mean, it's not technically a tax because it's a payment in lieu of tax. But the schedule starts at 14 cents per square foot in year one and increases annually until year 14 when they're at 48 cents per square foot. So this is not an insignificant amount, and what we really like about how this deal works is there's a lot of motivation for North Point to get these buildings going quickly, which then also is beneficial to us because then the faster they're built, the faster they're on the tax rolls. So I think this is one of those agreements that I think really is mutually beneficial. And what we are looking at when we kind of came up with that schedule is with the infrastructure, the unified government is kind of fronting $7.5 million for that. So 13.8 million will come from the federal government. North Point is putting in 1.5 million, KDOT 7.5, and then the unified government 7.5. And this is an infrastructure project that probably should have been done 40 years ago when the toll booths were moved by the Turnpike Authority. And so we're excited that this is something that's a long time coming, and by having it kind of paired with this project, we're kind of able to automatically have a revenue generator so that over the coming years we can actually kind of pay ourselves back. So not only are we getting good jobs, a lot of investment, and we also get a new interchange paid for. So also with the payment in lieu of taxes, those get split between all the taxing jurisdictions as a normal property tax would. So another really positive thing about this is from the first year, Turner School District as well as KCK Community College will be benefiting from this project. So I calculated by year 10, if we kind of stay on the schedule that's proposed, the education systems will receive $2.7 million. And then once all of the buildings are off from year one, they'll start receiving money. And then once all the abatements have expired, then they'll actually be getting nearly $2 million annually, which is a significant amount of money. Yes, Commissioner.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that I understand. So in terms of the construction of the new interchange,
yes.
You said we're going to put in $7.5 million into that construction, but the pilot will effectively go to make our bond payment on that 7.5. Is that
Correct.
how I understand it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, we have worked into the deal a minimum building requirement. So we feel very confident that North Point has always kind of exceeded expectations and certainly met them at the very least. So this is just something that we like to put in just to make ourselves feel better, just in case there's some catastrophic something. I don't even want to say it. But we're looking at a minimum building requirement of 1 million square feet built within 5 years.
Are there any questions from the committee?
I have a question.
Commissioner Walters?
How was the 14 cents per year pilot calculated?
So we basically looked at what we wanted to get out of this, so the $7.5 million, and then between Brent and I worked on a number of different iterations of, in your packet you can see the year by year how the pilot changes. But that was determined as a good starting point, as a place where Brent felt like he could get some early tenants in there, but then also it increases pretty rapidly so that we make sure within a couple years we're getting some real payback.
So it sounds like our goal was just to pay back the cost of the interchange construction. What you said?
Through the pilots, and then of course at the end of it's about 15 years is if it kind of works out, then obviously we'll get property tax.
How does 14 cents per square foot compare to other pilots for similar projects in other cities around this area?
Commissioner, would you like me to answer that? Would you like me to answer?
I'll defer to.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what we look at is that we compare these two projects in size to Northland Park, projects, we have Northern Park, 3 Trails, and what we call Southview. Northern Park, 3 Trails are in Kansas City, Missouri. Belton is in Southview. Our pilot in Belton is 5 cents. It's a 1% annual escalator, so much higher escalator. Northern Park and 3 Trails are 8 cents year 1, and they're fixed at 8 cents for 10 years, and then they move to about the 48, 50 cents for year 10 at Northern Park, year 13 at 3 Trails. In Kansas, you're limited to your fixed pilot per building for 10 years. You're not limited to that on the Missouri side.
Okay, so those are a couple that are less. Are there any that are higher?
Fixed pilot, Edgerton would be higher, but that's I would call it an apples to orange comparison. We pay a 62 cent pilot in Edgerton, but that is a bond issuance fee that's calculated. The city uses that to pay off their portion. We funded the money for the infrastructure there, which was last guess 30-some million, 40-some million dollars. So that is paid to the city and then repaid to repay the infrastructure for the bonds. So probably not a good comparison is why I didn't use it.
Okay. Well, just first blush, I'm a little disappointed, I think, as maybe Commissioner McCarron is, that yes, I love the project. It's going to be great for our community. It's disappointing that it'll have so little impact to our overall tax structure or revenue structure, in that it'll just pay for replacing a bridge that we had to tear down and some improvements to the interchange that KDOT should have made, as you said, 40 years ago when they took out all the toll booths. But it's certainly good for the community to get development. Thank you.
Can I just follow up really quick? So just to be clear, those are kind of during the pilot payments. Then once we're out of that, so 10 years per building, once we're done with that, then just the unified government's portion of that, once this is all on the tax roll, will be over $1.5 million annually.
And I just want to, so I'll reiterate what Commissioner Walters just said. You know, I have fussed quite a bit lately about projects where we get nothing out of it, and yet we are expected to provide infrastructure around the project, public safety services around and to the project, and it doesn't give us any capital to work with in improving other parts of our community. We take it just for the amenity value, and in this case, the amenity is great because we're going to get a lot of jobs. But as Commissioner Walters said, I'll say, you know what, okay, at least we are going to get paid back. We're not going to be on the hook for the infrastructure improvements around, specifically the diverging diamond, the interchange. So at least we're not going to be on the hook for that, and I guess I'll take that. I do like the fact that we're looking at less than 20 years for this to graduate and for us to start getting the full tax revenue from this, because at some point we need something in addition to the jobs. We need something in addition to the amenities. We need some capital that we can use for the overall improvement of infrastructure and neighborhoods across the entirety of the unified government. So I appreciate what you're doing, because this is going to have a benefit from day one. It's not quite the economic financial benefit that I would ideally like to have, but ultimately I do think this is a good project. Right.
Okay, so first I would imagine that we will at least see sales tax revenue from the businesses that go in.
You would see a limited amount of sales tax. Probably the BPU pilots would be, you know, that's something that probably should be calculated, and we can bring that to full commission. There is a benefit there. And again, I'm not, I hear you, and I hear you, Commissioner. This may incite a riot with you, but it is my opinion, so I at least want to say it, which is you did have an obligation for Riverview. You did have an obligation for Riverview, and we went to KDOT and got out of that obligation. So there was $7.5 million that you were going to budget in the capital expenditure that you didn't have to budget, and so we did trade. I think we traded Amazon and no obligation out of you for a payment out of us. I know that's a big picture and I have a slanted view, but that is my opinion still. You know, you can, I can understand your perspective, but I think Riverview, something had to be done Riverview as the Jersey barriers were about ready to fall off that thing. And it's been a stretched out timeline, but that is still the evolution of this project, in my opinion.
Okay, so since you brought up the pilot, the numbers up here, are they separate and apart from any potential reduction of pilot rate that the commission would apply? My hope would be,
yes, sure.
My hope would be that the BPU rate, the pilot rate that is applied to the BPU bills, would come down over time. I know that they've been sitting higher than was actually promised to a lot of the ratepayers in Wyandotte County for a few years. My hope would be that there will be a point that they will come down. When we had our rate increases, you guys saw the benefit of you saw the benefit of that increased revenue from that. So I know at the end of the day, it's a total number of dollars that are brought in by all the different taxing sources in Wyandotte County, but I think it's important that we really watch that pilot rate. It can and it has a major impact upon decisions of businesses to move into Wyandotte County. So I'm hoping that those numbers are separate and apart from, so if the rate comes down, those numbers stay the same.
Correct.
Right. It gets really confusing that you use pilot in the tax thing and BPU pilots is the same term, but they are separate. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, pilot fee.
That's exactly right.
If you'd like to look at it. Although it is a fee, many in the county don't look at it like that.
Yep.
So my other question would be about the infrastructure and the infrastructure needs that will come from the BPU. To do a project like this, I know that on the northeast side of the interchange, there is no infrastructure in there for water and power that have been ran, and there's going to be significant costs that are going to be borne by the BPU for this, a project like this, to get them to the land that
right.
North Point is going to be working on. So has the BPU staff already been involved in the early stages of this project and are aware of the costs that are going to be hit us? Because I do not remember any of this ever being brought up in front of the board as far as costs that we're going to be seeing and incurring in our, it's definitely not in our 2019 budget.
Yeah, usually with a project of this size, so Continental is our engineers, they interact with BPU a lot. I know that they have been interacting with BPU over the interchange in this project. So typically, because of the size of the users that we see here, we usually see a revenue justification. So we pay, for example, Village West, we pay for conduit. You don't have so there isn't typically a cost borne by you. Typically, a project this size generates enough power that we work out a cost justification agreement with the staff, typically.
I'm looking more at the water side because I know that we're going to have to run some major mains to feed.
Yeah, I don't know about water, Jeff. I don't know that detail, but I can follow up with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would be interested to know just how much the BPU is aware, the staff is aware.
Yeah, and if not, we'll make sure Continental, Phil and Phil Jr. Work with Pat and Jim and the other folks too, okay?
All right, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I do have a few, Brandon, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Just for the committee's clarification, there is a $1.5 million private contribution that will be coming forward into this project too, made by North Point.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a cash infusion towards that total amount. 6.5, I'm looking at page 8, it says intentionally deleted. Do we know what section that was intentionally deleted?
Let's take a look. Hold on just a second.
And that's something you can get back to me. I just wanted to, I just want to know what part of the contract was deleted for this specific contract, if it's going to be deleted moving on for the entire development. And then I do want to bring attention to the construction workforce. And Brent, you made comment about ancillary opportunities for our local community, and I sincerely appreciate and respect that, because it's about the return on investment of our county's tax dollars to ensure that we take care of the job opportunities for our residents first. And we really do hope that many of those will be filled by the local labor organizations and our skilled workforce. And I know it can't be mandated, but I would hope that there would be strong consideration to the underemployed skilled workforce that we have in our community that could contribute greatly to the ongoing construction and renovation and of the properties proposed.
Yep, understood. And like I said, we've had 4 or 5 development agreements with you and have exceeded the LMW. And even though it's not a requirement, we have exceeded my promises to Commissioner Kane as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and as commissioner of this community, I do want to see that return on investment for our families to be able to bump up that average median cost of a home in Wyandotte County, that they'll want to invest. Hopefully the workers, while they're here doing construction work, may find how nice and welcoming Wyandotte County is and choose to become a resident of our community through that opportunity. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Anybody from the public have any questions or comments? Oh, Gail, I'm sorry. Representative Townsend.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Mr. Miles. Just point of clarification on the screen. How many buildings will there be? One contiguous building?
No, there will be multiple buildings. Maybe we can go back to the master plan. And again, this will evolve as we work through ROB and final planning and BPU infrastructure planning. I will generally note that we are in acquisition mode for more houses in this area. I won't give any specifics, but some of these buildings could grow. But generally what you see there is what do you got, an 8-building plan. So each one of those, let's see, I don't know if there's a laser pointer here. Is that a laser? This thing? Okay, so as you can see, labeled building 1, 2, and I think we switch over here, building 3. So this stick of butter is obviously an individual building. So it'll take us some time. So Cobb Point, to put it in perspective, you and I drove through Cobb Point and you thought that was a really large building. This one of our smaller buildings here, is bigger than Cobb Point. So that's one. That's Cobb Point, just almost dead on, right there in size.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Any members of the public wish to make a statement? Please, as you approach the microphone, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Lori Reeves. I live at 516 North 75th Terrace. We've noticed that there's been a lot of surveying on that area. I live in the Crestmore Downs there by the parking area off of I-70, and I'm wondering how far is that going to come in? Is that going to include our homes?
Yeah, I
have to comment on that.
No, I live at 75th Terrace. So basically, we live in Crestmore Downs. It's behind Quick Trip, back over by the hotel, and I'm kind of a ways from that.
Oh, yeah, that won't be included in this project.
It won't. But are there plans for something else that's in the area? Is that why they're surveying and there's all the stakes in our area?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can certainly check on that for you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve the resolution as submitted.
Motion been made and seconded. Clerk will call roll.
Roll call. Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walters. Bryant.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Good seeing you.
Thank you, Brent. Okay. We'll wait for staff to shuffle, then we'll move on to item number 3. is a report of the 2018 reserves and fund balance. Okay, we have Kathleen Von Atchen and as our Chief Financial Officer is here this evening, and her staff. And so Kathleen, the presentation is yours.
Thank you. This is, as I discussed at the last month's ED&F meeting, today we're going to be presenting the 2018 year-end fund balances for the general fund and for the special revenue funds. And so we'll start this off. All right, so what we're going to discuss first, you know, we're going to break this up by general fund and then the special revenue funds. We're going to, on the general fund side, we're going to just have a discussion of the performance of the fund balance, the fund balance and our target reserves. And we're also going to add in a little discussion of the sales tax revenue performance during 2018. For the special revenue funds, we're talking about the fund balance performance and the targets, but we're going to review briefly the legal authority for the uses and sources of those special funds and any kind of future plans for the ending balance. So rather than showing you a financial statement, what we decided to do was present you a historic view of the general fund's total fund balance as a percentage of expenditures and transfers. This is how we review the performance of our fund balance, as you know, and we'll talk about this later, but the target as adopted by all of you in our fund balance reserve policy was to have 2 months of operating expenditures on hand for in case of emergencies or to provide us the liquidity throughout the year to pay our bills, right? And so 2 months worth of expenditures roughly equates to 17%. And our estimate for 2018 is that we'll be reaching that. We are estimating to have 19% in fund balance, 19% of our expenditures reserved in our fund balance. Now, when I say estimate, it's because the final audit won't be presented for your, for your acceptance until June, but for the most part, it's pretty final. So right now we're at 19%. We did drop down from 21% the year before, and the reason for that is that revenues and transfers in less expenditures and transfers out came up to a net negative of $1 million. There were $210 million in general fund revenues and $211 million in general fund expenditures. So this of course is on a modified accrual basis. What does that mean? Well, cash basis is very much based on the money coming in and the money going out within the respective 12 months. But when we look at modified accrual, we're taking into account, for example, sales tax. The state collects the sales tax on behalf of local governments. So the activity of the sale, the retail activity, point of sale, for example, occurring in December, we don't actually receive it until February. So this is one example where on the modified accrual basis, we would accrue the cash we received in February to the prior year. And of course, the same goes on the top of the year. So there are many other kind of examples on the spending side too. So it's a way in accounting to properly record the activity in the year in which it occurred. So that's the difference there. So this is just a reminder of the general fund reserve policy. As I mentioned, we had, as a target, the 17%. We also have in the policy the option of achieving over the future a potential additional amount for emergencies, economic uncertainty, and such. One of the key components that I wanted to point out is also, at some time during the year when it may become apparent that we're not going to be meeting our target, the budget staff will come forward as part of the budget process and let you all know, and come up with a plan. If we do dip into the fund balance, because there is some economic condition that requires that, or based on your approval, there is in the policy provisions for replenishing the fund balance back to the operating reserve target of 2 months over a 5-year period, based on a long-range plan. So, okay. So now we wanted to. Are there any questions about the fund balance of the general fund?
Any questions? Seeing none, Kathleen, continue, please.
Thank you. So, so wanted to talk about sales tax. So, at the last monthly meeting of our committee, we presented to you the Q4, the fourth quarter budget versus actual report. And as you know, that's all based on a cash basis. So, and the budget that you develop and review during the course of the entire year, it's all based on a cash basis. So, what we noticed is that just in the general fund, which sales tax is collected in a variety of other funds, but right now we're just during the conversation we had a month ago, we were reviewing the budget for the sales tax estimate, right? And we reported that $3 million did not come in that we expected, or was below the estimate. That was for all three of the general funds, the city, the county, and the Parks and Rec doesn't have any sales tax. So, and so those kind of declines were kind of surprising to all of us, especially given the strong performance that occurred in the first 6 months of 2018. So this decline, in sales tax, it kind of echoed a cautionary tale of what we viewed during the recession from 10 years ago. But when we walk through this, we're gonna talk a little bit more about that, and I hope to relieve some of your concerns. There is one thing that I did want to mention. So right now we have a greater reliance. Our operations are relying more on sales tax revenue because as part of when we paid off the STAR bonds, as you know, a lot of talk about this $12 million in STAR bond revenue. Well, again, let me remind you, almost $4 million of it was actually dedicated for dedicated sales tax and for EMS, right? So actually the STAR bond amount coming into the general fund was $9 million. Over 17, 18, and 19, 2 mills each of those years were reduced, and the rough equivalent of that is $6 million. So we got $9 million more in property in sales tax, and then we reduced our property tax by roughly $6 million. The net is a $3 million addition to the revenue base, just to give you an idea. So our reliance on sales tax is increasing. We have a very diversified revenue structure. So as I mentioned before, $210 million in revenue. And so, the shift that I'm talking about only changed the reliance on sales tax from in 2016, 21% to 2018, 23%. So It did, but if you look at 17, and given the strong sales tax performance in 17, 17's was around 26%. So just some information for you, you know. The other point is that there are, that sales tax is very sensitive to collection methods. So a lot of, not in Kansas, but in a lot of states, it kind of depends on the scope of the sale of the tax base. And in Kansas, we don't tax services or groceries. So, the other thing is that online sales, we believe, has maybe contributed to a shifting of the amount of revenues we've collected in sales tax, because you know, e-commerce has an increasing share of the market of retail, and collection of that sales tax has been challenged. The very last thing I wanted to mention is that sales tax is very sensitive to economic conditions. Now, when we first looked at why we didn't get that $3 million that we expected, I asked my staff to review what we call the entity files, right? That's a file of all the vendors, how much they paid every month for the past year, trying to figure out which vendors perhaps went bankrupt, which ones left, what major vendors impacted the reduction. And we really couldn't find anything in particular. So we decided, well, maybe it was because of the growth in online sales, or maybe perhaps it's macroeconomic conditions. And that is what we're concluding in the end. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides that kind of support that, that conclusion. Generally speaking, and you could read it in all the news media, last year there was the stock market was very volatile, and there was a lot of economic uncertainty. The Feds were increasing interest rates, which does, in a sense, inhibit business growth. There were trade disputes, the federal government shutdown, and slow automobile sales. So quite a bit going on in the last 6 months of last year. So we looked at the U.S. Census Bureau's retail sales report. This is something that all the folks that work in the stock market look at every month. And what we're looking at actually is the percentage difference between the prior year's month for that month and this month. So, and this year's month. So they call that year-over-year percentage monthly change. So, for example, if I collected $100 in 2017 in January, and then in January 2018 I collected 110, then that would be a 10% increase. So that's how this works. And this is the slope of the graph in all of 2018. So it starts out, and you can see how it lumps, there's a big sloping up here at the beginning, and then it drops down. There's a hump in October, and then it starts to pick up the beginning of 19. This is how Wyandotte County looks. And what we have, same figures. Now these are based on all total distributions from the state to us. We have so roughly $50 million over the year, 50 including all UG-wide, all the sales tax, including dedicated sales tax and such, but excluding the star bonds. So in January, there was a 19% increase. In February, a 3.7% increase. Well, the whole point is that the point of this exercise is that it was significant. There was growth at the beginning of the year, and then a decline at the end. And so the averaging doesn't explain the total picture. So,
Kathleen, But,
Yes.
but without the actual number of dollars that are purchased during each of those representative months, I mean, a 20% increase on $1 million month is, different than a 5% decrease on a $10 million month. So without having the actual dollars per month, it's hard to really relate that into a pattern.
This represents $50 million worth of retail revenue collections throughout the entire year, and it compares it with the prior year for that roughly same amount. So,
Well, I understand, but what I'm saying is like where that large spike is, where it's 20% above, closer to 2019 on the other end, is that the Black Friday shopping of November, and how many dollars is that 20% above
okay,
dollars that were spent the year before?
all right. Well, I have all that information. So March and April increased 15%, and that's the same, roughly the same increase that occurred. Well, I'm going to show you another city in a moment. Then we have the decline that starts. May was at 9%, June was at 3%, July was at 6%, and then there was an anomaly in October, and that's because the October 2017 number was uncharacteristically low. But we also have a lump in the Census Bureau in October as well, so a jump up as well. And then it drops down again. We're at negative 9% in December, negative 9% in January, and January is negative 14%, and then February is negative 4%. Now let me explain that this isn't the figures that I'm showing you are based on the month in which the retail sale occurred. But all of us here in finance, we don't see that until 2 months afterwards. So these declines that occurred in May, June, and July, we didn't see until July, August, September. So while we were forming the budget, we were looking at the prior years.
Kathleen, without reference dollars, this graph really doesn't tell me anything except that people shopped more in March of 2018 than they did in March of 2017, spent more dollars, but it doesn't tell me reference-wise how many more dollars or how many fewer dollars in any given month. So, I mean, we can look at the total year-over-year spend and just tell our percentage from that, but...
Yeah, well, I'm happy to provide it to you. I don't have it with me on this graph.
Yeah.
Now, here's Overland Park, right? Same slope. See, Wyandotte County, Overland Park. This is my point, is that this is a kind of a national, kind of regional thing. It's not any individual vendor. It's not necessarily something that occurred just in Wyandotte County. So just to give you an idea. So that's all my point is. And by the way, so I've been reading, been doing some research. We've talked with some economists, and the thought is that although we're not going to see a rebound of the growth that we saw at the first 6 months of 2018, we are going to see some growth. It will be more modest in 19, and so although these negative declines look pretty dire, as I mentioned, it was a very volatile time. The stock market was moving up and down. The feds were increasing the rates. The federal government shut down, so forth, and so those are things that are not predicted in the future for 19, and so of course we don't get information. So the latest we have is February, and right now we're in April. So as we get information, we update We update our estimates and we do the best we can with the information we have. But right now, I'm anticipating that we'll probably be, barring any kind of further analysis, probably going to be adding a 2% growth rate off of the 2018 actuals. So,
to me, I think the biggest concern in the sales tax revenue would be what is the state and federal government doing to standardize the collection of sales tax for municipalities in reference to this, because I think online shopping is going to become more and more the norm, and brick and mortars are becoming less and less. I mean, we've seen that with the ones that have gone bankrupt and are closing, and it just seems like as far as brick and mortars are going, it's becoming more of a lean toward the mom and pop shop mentality, but that's not where the heavy retail dollars are going to be found. So
yeah, that is very concerning, and all the local governments are, looking at that closely. So the next section here, we're going to talk about the special revenue funds, and we have a reserve policy for them as well. There's not a definite, it's not really based on the months of operations, but rather a range for each of the specific funds. And for the most part, it has the same provisions in terms of replenishing the fund once you dip into it, and then also monitoring throughout the year. All right, so last year during last year during our one of our workshops during the budget process, we kind of walked through the authorization of all these special revenue funds, and as a means of communicating or discussing what are the obligations that we have to adhere to that are imposed to us by the state or other bodies for these special revenue funds. Because the reason they're special revenue is because the revenue you collect is dedicated for specific purposes within certain caveats. And so there are 4 categories, and we're not going to go into this super detailed because we've already gone through this 6 months ago, or maybe 8 or 9 months ago. But there's the county levy funds, the debt service funds, the funds restricted by Kansas state statute, and then funds created by the UG Commission with the authority of state statute. The first ones are the county levy funds, and we have 5 of them. Developmental disabilities, elections, the health department, mental health, and the aging fund, or the special programs for the elderly. And what we've provided here is, as promised, a listing of the total amount of dollars spent, including transfers out for each of those funds, the estimated ending fund balance for 2018, what percent of that is, so the percentage of the fund balance into the transfers and expenditures. And then over here is the target that's in the policy. And then this is the amount in which it exceeds the highest. So what I did was I took 15%, of expenditures, and then I subtracted out the amount that is in the fund balance, and this is how much more in excess of the target these funds are. All right. So each of these have a property tax levy. That's why they're property tax levy funds, and that support these functions. And so this is the information you were looking for. So I did want to point out that if we were perhaps to make some adjustments to the revenue level in order to diminish this excess amount in some of the respective funds, the proposal, or we'd recommend is that you we would change the mill rate within these, or shift mill rates amongst these funds. right? And so in 2020, because you can't do it in 19, the mill rate's already been set, certified and set. So that's what we're we're not recommending anything necessarily. We're just suggesting that would be the means of doing that. So you can see the aging fund is barely keeping up, and it's at 3%. And of course, Reggie has a little information. He may be able to answer more specific questions about why some of these balances are being accumulated. But generally speaking, it's because they anticipate potential increases in caseload or increased costs, in the future. And of course, the best way to determine, as part of the budget process, to determine if there is excess that we need to do to recommend maybe some shifting of mill rates would be actually to look at the 19 ending fund balance. So that's what we do as part of the budget process.
Any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Kathleen, so would the recommendation or the supposed recommendation of staff be that the mill levy in general for the county levy fund stays totally the same, but it's just a shifting of buckets?
Yeah, we don't really have a recommendation right now because we're in the middle of developing the budget process. So,
If I may answer that, that'll be the Finance Committee's position as well as the full commission to come forward with determining if those mills need to be adjusted into what category specifically. As far as commingling the funds and keeping the total mill levy, the total mill levy may be the same, but they may be different for each fund. When you see funds that are overfunded by a tremendous percentage, either you spend them for the projects that they're mandated to be spent on, or you have to lower the option you have is to lower the mill rate that the monies that are collected to go into that fund. But you can't commingle the funds, so we couldn't basically move developmental disabilities down to the seniors for the elderly. But what we could do is bump up the mill levy for the elderly and lower the one for either the health department or elections or something along those lines. But we, Kathleen, if I understand correctly, we have $421,561 in excess of our statutorily mandated monies set aside in our reserves.
For
all those,
with these 5 funds.
For those 5 funds. Okay, thank you.
That's correct. All right, so the next one we're gonna, so by the way, we have some information here on each of the funds and the statutory authority. And by the way, the actual mill rates for these respective funds, or all the funds, frankly, is provided in the front part of the budget document. So, you could look at, it's in the summary or financial section, so. All right, so now what we're going to talk about are the debt service funds. And so I'm going to pass this on to my Deputy Finance, or Chief Financial Officer, Debbie Johnson.
Good evening. So the next set of funds we're going to talk about are the debt service funds. Currently, there are 2 debt service. We have a city bond and interest fund and a county bond and interest fund. As you can see up there, we have, there are 3 lines up there. We've separated out the TIF portion of the city bond and interest fund. Any TIF projects that have debt related to them, we track those separately in a sub-fund that roll up to the city bond and interest fund. So these funds are collect both property tax revenues, as well as the city bond and interest has enterprise fund transfers for debt that's issued for the enterprise funds, and the county bond and interest has public building commission lease revenue included in there. These have the same information that Kathleen had shown with the previous funds. So it shows the expenditures and then the ending fund balance here, as well as the percentages. I did want to note over here, we're showing that the balance in the city bond and interest fund in excess of the reserve target is about $12.2 million. However, the TIF related projects, as you can see, are in a negative $5.4 million balance. So when they roll up together, the total is actually the net of the two, which is about around 7 million. Did want to note on the TIFs that the revenue that comes in for the TIF revenue is about $2 million. And you can see the expenditures for 2018 are at 3.6. So there's a difference of about 1.6 million there. The Midtown TIF, which we just refinanced a little over a week ago, I think about 2 weeks ago, was a TIF project and being tracked, but it had debt service requirements, but there was no TIF revenue being generated on the project, and the debt service payments for that were about 1.4 million. So that's almost the entire difference there. The other 200,000 is probably a little bit split between the other projects.
Commissioner McKierney?
I'm sorry we didn't need to stop them, but you know, this is interesting. It's an interesting snapshot, a point in time. I was just going to say that before I would consider making any shifts to mill rates or anything like that, I'd want to see over time. What's the longitudinal picture? What's the year over year? Is it consistently high? Is it consistently low? Is it high one year, low the next? So just, this is very interesting, and I think it would suggest that we have quite a bit of money in excess of what our reserve policy is, but kind of tempered by what's the year over year picture look like. So
I did want to note that on the city bond and interest fund, we do bring in about 20 million in tax revenues and about 9 million in transfers, and then there's another 3 million probably in other revenues, motor vehicle tax revenues. On the county bond and interest fund, you'll note that expenditures, fund balance here is about 4.7 million. Expenditures were a little over 3 million. And with our target there, we are sitting in a fund balance in excess of our target of about 4.4. I will note for that fund that the debt for the juvenile center, the Public Building Commission debt for that project is hitting this fund, and we are transferring money from savings on the county general fund side to cover a portion of that debt, or cover that debt. So we are making transfers. In 2017, we transferred 1.5 million. In 2018, we transferred $1 million with debt service payments annually of about 1.7 million starting in 2019.
So I do have a question in reference to that. We saved, I think we heard one of your presentations earlier this year, that we had saved some money by not spending it in 2018. And so my question would be, if we're saving the monies, the 1.5, is this also some of that savings coming from reissuing bonds at a lower rate? Is that some of the savings you're talking about is coming out?
No, the savings that was estimated on the inmate housing, the savings that we were generating from not having to farm out as many inmates, we were using that, we've dedicated that to going toward the debt service payment of the new juvenile center.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Can I?
Oh, sure.
Well, I did want to point out that you had asked us for some more detailed information of the transfers that took place at the end of 2018, and as well as project balances or the status of projects. And we are working on that. We have it finalized. In fact, Doug is reviewing that, so you'll be getting it in a few days. Okay.
So this is just some of the statutes that govern the debt service funds. I did want to note that statutes do require that the city make tax levies sufficient to support the bonds, and it also restricts the transfer of resources out of the bond and interest fund until all outstanding bond issues have been extinguished. So the excess money that is currently sitting there can only be used for the payment of principal and interest payments on outstanding debt. The next set of funds that we want to cover are funds restricted by state statute. So here we've got several different funds. We've got several technology funds, the clerk, the county treasurer, the Register of Deeds technology funds, as well as the court trustee, the special 911 fund, special alcohol and parks and rec funds, and then the street and highway. So within all of these funds, same information that we provided before. So we're currently looking at fund balance in excess of the target reserve of about $4.2 million. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on each one of these funds and what they're restricted for. So the county technology funds, the revenue that's collected is a fee on filing documents with the Register of Deeds, and each of these funds gets a portion of that fee. Now those fees are restricted to acquire equipment and technology services for storing, recording, maintaining, handling of data generated in the offices. Did want to note there is statutory language regarding the direction on the use of excess balances at the end of a calendar year. If a balance in such one of these funds exceeds $50,000 and the clerk in each of these areas indicates that the amount in excess of $50,000 isn't needed for technology within those offices, the commission can authorize a transfer to use that money for other county offices, but it must be used for equipment and technology services relating to land or property records filed and maintained by the county. The court trustee fund receives fees related to child support payments and restitution payments. These are restricted for fund operations to fund the office of the court trustee and in the discretion of the chief judge, necessary for the use of the court trustee to enforce duties in the child support administration. The special alcohol and the special parks and rec funds, these receive the alcohol tax. This is 10% of gross receipts derived from the sale of alcohol. It is split. A third of it goes to the city general fund, a third of it goes to the special alcohol fund, and then a third goes to the special parks and rec fund. And the funds within the special alcohol are to be expended for the purpose of alcoholism and drug abuse prevention and education, and for parks and rec, the purchase, establishment, and maintenance of parks and recreational facilities. The street and highway fund is gets all their revenue from the motor fuel tax collections. The allocations for the city and county are based on population, and those funds are also restricted to be used for construction and maintenance of city streets and highways. Special 911 fund, this one receives a fee from all phone subscriber accounts. We've got here listed the state allocation for the revenues and then all the different restrictions on the uses of those revenues.
Let's go back to
which one?
Just the overview of this one. Yeah. Do you have any questions on the balances on these?
Yes, Commissioner McKiernan?
I don't really have any question other than I think one of the reasons that this originally came up was a concern that we might be collecting money in excess of what it takes to pay that fund's annual bills and maintain an adequate reserve. These data would seem to suggest we are collecting money that is well in excess of what it takes to pay that fund's annual bills and maintain an adequate reserve. And so unless I'm missing, and again, I want to temper that with what are the fluctuations from year to year in this, but these data certainly suggest to me that we are going to need to do some reconsidering of the funds we collect and store for paying these particular bills.
So I think there may be, so just to point out, the 1.6 million excess for the special street and highway, those are for, various ongoing projects. So some of that those funds may actually have already been budgeted for various projects that were in mid-completion, so.
And I think this is what comes out from the budget subcommittee, the questions that were brought forward in reference to the $4.2 million of excess reserves that we have in those accounts. And I just want to look at the chief clerk technology account as an example here for discussion. Either it's definitely we're over the amount of percentage of reserves, but if there's a technology needed in that agency or that department, those monies should be spent to do that. And if we're holding back, spending those dollars to sweep them at the end of the year in excess of 50,000, that is a really non-transparent way that business is being conducted. And I'm not saying that's the case, but in a previous slide, we saw that in excess of 50,000. So if we were in a budget crisis, I could see someone coming forward to the county clerk and stating, you're not going to need that money this year, are you? And I am sweeping those dollars. And at the same time, the clerk may need the technology funds to update his system to make sure that we are a city of the first class, providing first-class amenities and the proper services for our community. Because the money is there, and that's what it should be appropriated for. And I think that was some of the question in reference to the $4.2 million of reserves that we see over here and all the out-of-balance reserves that we see in the balance column.
Yeah,
If I'm wrong, I hope one of the other commissioners would correct me, but I believe that was some of the discussion that we had in our budget subcommittee.
I do know that the city clerk would very much like to, or the county, the UG clerk actually, would very much like to pursue a comprehensive document management program, but the cost of that sort of program, it exceeds the $120,000.
So what they're doing is storing the money up. But they have the $120,000. So they're storing the money up so they can purchase the document management system that Kathleen is referring to.
Okay, so if that's the case, it does look like we have a revenue stream to build those balances. And so why don't we enter into a contract that provides an update in that technology and pay a nice lump sum up front and then pay a yearly payment for a year or two. If we need that technology to make our business more streamlined or more professional to provide the services that our community needs, I mean, I understand technology is expensive, but at the same time, we see an excess of 4.2 million sitting over here. And what my concerns are, I have seen sweeps occur. And I'm not saying here at the unified government, I have seen sweeps occur when times get hard. And it's easy to identify those funds that have excess balances in them. And even though they are meant to do other things. So our concern as commissioners would be that if that technology is definitely in need of update, then we need a timeline as to when it will be completed and a cost analysis that might put us at ease as to why we're seeing a 1,189% percentage in reserves when we're only supposed to be at 5 to 10%.
Well, you're accurate in use the clerk technology fund as an example because I think it's illustrative of the challenge, which is that the document management system is an order of magnitude larger than is available. So when we've been looking at, and we are actively looking at that as a enterprise-wide solution, this would be one of several or general fund dollars that would then be combined together in order to provide both the initial project funding needed for it, as well as you alluded to, the stream of funding needed behind that in order to pay the software maintenance. So I very, very much take your point about you're putting sort of targets at risk for future sweeps should the situation change. And at the same time, we're trying to put together a project in that specific area where we can provide a comprehensive document management solution that will be, again, well in excess of the available fund dollars in this particular account.
Commissioner McKierney?
So what you're saying is these numbers are meaningless to me. meaningless, because every time we bring up a particular number, there's a yeah, but that goes along with it. Yeah, but we're saving up money for some cool stuff. And I don't know, it's hard for me to understand these numbers. We say that we have targeted 5 to 10%, and we've got 1,189%, yeah, but we're saving up for some cool stuff. Well, that's not immediately obvious. So anyone like me who's not dealing on this on a daily basis, but yet is charged with making sure that these monies are a wise use of the resources that we get, has a really hard time doing it. Oh, well, that's okay, I'm done.
I think you sense the concern that the Finance Committee has had in reference to these numbers when we were going through the budget process. And I really hope that the next budget cycle that we look at these funds, and as we requested maybe in the past, one of the requests was hypothetically have the county clerk technology person come in and advise us as to what he's looking at, what the expense will be to replace that system, and what we can do to find the revenues available so that we can be partners in this process. But this leads to, I would call it speculation at best, and we want to be able to trust the numbers. And when I see a $4.2 million balance over here in reserve funds, I see sidewalks not being addressed, I see playgrounds not being addressed, I see parks going underfunded, and I know those dollars don't speak to that, all of them, but that's what I see. And if that's not what we are seeing, then we need that clarification for the public to understand why those dollars are sitting idle in those accounts.
Perhaps we can come back to, I think part of the challenge in seeing this as well is that we're mixing, just as we did last time, I think we're mixing capital and operating. So when we talk about a target reserve range, we're really sort of, that's in an operating budget kind of frame of mind, right? Where you say you've got a reserve and you want to keep that in case you're, but what we're seeing on these technology fund balances in particular is they act more like a capital project where they accumulate over time and then they get spent at one point in time after 5 or 7 years of accumulation. And so we're kind of, we're mixing fund types in a way that I think is introducing.
Actually, these particular special revenue funds are set up to pay for both operating and capital. That's why it's that way.
Unfortunately, though, they don't bring in enough money annually to pay on all of them anyway, at least the county clerk's fund, to pay for anything but technology upgrades, and it's not being used for personnel.
But aren't I setting a target reserve for an operating fund, not for a capital accumulation fund?
When we were going through the reserve policy, what we did, because we had so much to do, right? We updated 10 policies. So one of the things that we talked about was leaving just changing, making sure all the funds are in place, and updating the names of the funds, which were not, and then in the future, examining, whether we should have a discussion about changing some of these percentages. But so the percentages are the same as they have been in the past. It's entirely up to you how much the range should be.
And Kathleen, I want to thank you because the Finance Committee came to you and said, we want to see numbers before we saw percentages. And you put the dollar amounts in there. And I really appreciate how, it was a little confusing at first when I was trying to decipher how you came to the end column, but after you explained it, then it makes sense of what I'm looking at. You've taken the expenses out, and this is what's over once you put the maximum percentage amount in there. So I appreciate that. I believe there's no nefarious reason about these numbers. It's very concerning to some of us when we see 4.2 million sitting idle. And we know that we have technology needs, we know we have other needs, and to see that money sitting there when we know that's going to probably either have to come out as general fund or something if it's not enough, we need to know that. And we want to partner with the administrator to address our needs, but first and foremost, we want to do it in a transparent manner.
Well, so this is a beginning, introductory presentation. It's the beginning of the discussion is how I see it. And as we continue through the budget process or in the coming month, we can come back and provide better information about any kind of respective plans for some of these balances. Is just a beginning.
Well, I appreciate that, and it may be that as Finance Committee, we don't need to break down into a subcommittee, and two or three of us meet with individuals of these departments to find out just what it is their needs may be, and then we could be their voice to determine how we want to go about setting the budget when it comes time for the next budget meeting.
I'm sure that they would welcome that. Absolutely.
Thank you, Kathleen. Please continue.
Just got one last section of funds, and these are funds that were created by the UG Commission with the authority of state statute. So we've got the jail commissary, the special dedicated sales tax, the special asset fund, tourism convention, and environmental trust. And I'll just go through these real quick. The jail commissary comes from money from, the revenue is from the sale of products for the inmates, and the funds are to be used directly to benefit the inmates. Dedicated sales tax is the 3/8 cent sales tax that started on in July of 2010. In 2018, it was renewed by public vote for another 10 years. This fund generates about $10 million annually, and it goes toward public safety operations and neighborhood infrastructure projects. The Special Asset Fund was created to record revenues associated with the sale of government assets. The two assets that we currently have used this fund for were the sale of the theater and the sale of the downtown hotel. Let's see if I was going to say anything. So those funds are held within this fund, and then we're using those for economic development projects. Tourism convention is the transient guest tax. It's 8% of hotel and motel transactions, and it's used for the promotion of convention and tourism within Kansas City, Kansas. The environmental trust fund, the revenues from there come from a portion of the trash collections. These help to mitigate costs related to environmental liabilities. And that's the end of the presentation.
Any questions for staff?
I have an observation. I think I have a little bit of the frustration that Brian has, because it sounds like, based on what you're telling us, is that we can make some adjustments to mill levies to reduce those reserves based on the size of those current reserves. And I guess there might be a couple caveats to that. One, it sounds like you've based all those reserve recommendations on 2018 expenditures, and it might be that the expenditures in that particular year might have been abnormal or something, so maybe it's a 5-year average or something like that. And then the second caveat might be that we need to build up reserves for a future expenditure, and at that point I think it would be good to ask for approval to do that rather than just to stockpile money and have never talked to any commissioner about it and just assume that at some point in a future date a commission will authorize that expenditure. So it seems like the cart's a little bit ahead of the horse when we start stockpiling money without an approved plan for how to spend it. That's just a couple observations.
Yeah, so one of the policies you adopted was long-range financial policies, and so that's actually what you're talking about. So, and we definitely want to expand the long-range financial policies to beyond the general fund to the other operating funds, and perhaps we can do for each of all of these funds.
Thank you. Great. Kathleen and staff, I do want to thank you for the work you put into this presentation. And I know there have been some requests that are a little bit different, probably what you're used to presenting. But I think what we established here this evening by putting it into a monetary amount, seeing the totals, we see almost $20 million in reserve funds sitting idle. And whether they're earmarked or not, we don't know. We see the policy on each one, whether it be the UG policy or state statute, but that criteria should be communicated to the commission so that we can partner with you to help get this budget more streamlined, and that the resources are going to the projects and to the departments and the agencies as mandated by the mill levy and or by policy. And we want to partner with you in doing that, but we can't if we don't have a thorough understanding. It makes it a little more difficult. But I sincerely appreciate the effort and work you put forward in putting that monetary value in there. I think it really helps seeing the financial picture versus just the percentages that I remember seeing when I first came in. So thank you so very much. All right. Yes, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Townsend, I apologize.
No problem. Just have one question, and I think this is a timing issue. Listen to what my other commissioners have said. We're looking at 2018 numbers. We've already last year gone through the budget cycle for the year we're currently in. So the only impact we could really have is on 2020, what's coming up. Is it possible to have these kind of numbers shown, but what happened in 2019, I guess year to date? Because to me, that would make the most sense if we're talking about making some changes so that certain funds can be lowered, or the target reserves. We're talking about freeing up actual money so you can do sidewalks and curbs and all the other things that our constituents want to see. Is it possible to do that? I know you've got a whole year here, but I don't know that that really helps me understand where we can go based on what's happening right now.
So what you're asking, from what I understand, is that you might like to see, so through April, for example, April 2019, year to date.
Of the current year.
Yeah.
It's just something that, to me, that would make, I see, we've got the whole year, but if we're even considering making some changes that would impact the next budget we have yet to do, I think that might give us a better idea of what's happening.
So that would, that would make sense if the revenues come in consistently throughout the year, but some don't. For example, the property tax comes in, half of it comes in January, and the other half basically in June, and different revenues come in at different times. But we do, Reggie's office puts together the budget to actual report that shows you how the status or the performance of the budget of the funds, at each quarter. And so that's where you get that information. I don't think I'm not remembering if the report has fund balances for these funds, though. So we'd probably have to change the report. That last page of the report, we'd have to change it a little bit. But.
And I'm familiar with the report that you're talking
Yeah.
about. It just seems to me that if you had something as current and as relevant as that, coupled with these figures, as Chairman has mentioned, that we could have a more immediate impact based on more current knowledge of what's happening in those funds as we go into whatever the next budget cycle.
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Also in the budget document, all those funds, you see the fund balances up until the next budget cycle. So we have like the fund balances up until 2019 in there, in the budget documents in the financial summary section.
I think another thing that might be helpful would be in those areas that do have excess reserves in it, knowing, is there a plan for specific projects, and what are the threshold of dollars needed for that plan? Because, I mean, when you see one that's 470%, and it's $1 million already over in reserve, maybe there is a specific project that they are waiting to get to and they're going to come ask permission. It would be good for the commission to know this is the project that we're shooting for, and this is the dollars we expect it to be, and that's why. Because then it takes out a little bit of that mystery.
Well, tonight was, tonight we had a lot of agenda items, and so we didn't want to be here till 11 or so.
Well, I agree. I'm just saying that would be information going
we're
forward.
happy to
especially
do that as part
budget.
of the budget process. I mean, our next meeting is June, and we can provide that.
I mean, just going into budget, knowing, so that funds don't get, or mill levies don't get shuffled that would affect a project that they're hoping to have at a future date.
Well, Kathleen, I will state this. I will commit as chair to meet with you during the summer months prior to the June meeting to sit down and work through some of this so that we can look at the kind of information that maybe some of us will need to expedite your presentations and to ensure that we're all talking in the same language when we see these budgets and the questions can be answered as we work through them. So I commit to partnering with you and staff, sitting down, walking through those fund balances and finding out what targets are sitting out there that need to hit a certain financial threshold so that we can move past that adjustment on the percentage of balance. And if we have to, we'll make it a number of meetings, but I'll make myself available. So
That's very kind.
thank you so very much. Anything else? Any other questions? Seeing none, that takes, it was for information only. The last, with that, we have our last item for the evening is the budget revision. Oh, no, that's not it. We just finished that one. We do have the treasurer, is what I saw here. Where, I'm missing a piece of my agenda. Oh, the approved budget policy. Thank you. Somehow.
I think the next agenda item is our Q1 investment report.
Yeah, I have budget revision policy as the next item. I don't. Yeah. Oh, okay. I apologize. Okay, very good. Then my agenda is wrong.
So, Rick McKessick, just
okay, my
Rick
agenda.
McKessick,
I'm looking
our
at an
county
older
treasurer
agenda.
and deputy treasurer, and Andrea Parra will be joining us.
I stand corrected. I was looking at an older agenda, so that's exactly right. Item number 4 is the first quarter 2019 investment report, and no, that's still the same one. I've got an old. Thank you. I've got an old agenda. Thank you. I do know that our treasurer has been sitting patiently to give us a report and to be questioned. So, Mr. McKessick, welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, and we appreciate your time. We will respect your time, so we will be as brief but informative as possible. Do not feel that you can't ask any questions of us, though, however, so feel free to ask any questions you might have. I'm going to have Andrea Parra start the presentation, as Andrea is the deputy treasurer. She is also the cash manager, and so she's going to give us the start.
Good evening, everyone. Like you said, I will make this brief. There's not much to it. A lot of it is presented every quarter. Just a few key items I want to go off of. Quick summary, our average yield for Q1 was 2.23%. And then as you see, the days to maturity is 394 days. And then of the total portfolio, we're at about 23% cash. Then the remaining 77% is investments. Next slide is going to be our types of securities. Of the $245 million portfolio, we have about $160 million, which is just about 65% in CDs, fully collateralized. Then of the same $245 million portfolio, about $28 million or 11% is in U.S. agencies, also secured by faith and credit of the U.S. federal government. Next slide I have is the slide regarding compliance. As noted before, our yield is 2.23%. We are below the target benchmark due to some of the holdings we still have that are prior to the Fed rate increases. And we have become in non-compliance with one institution since lowering the rate to 25%. But in calculation for the Q2, we would bring that limit back down below 25% and be back in compliance for June's quarter. Last slide is just going to be the transactions that occurred in quarter one. As you see, we did make 3 purchases totaling $25 million, all certificates of deposit, and then 2 CDs matured equaling $5 million. Next one is going to be for Rick.
And what the prior slides are showing is the cash holdings of the unified government as a whole and where we have invested those dollars. What this slide is presenting is the breakdown on where that cash is sitting inside the variety of funds that we have in the unified government. So you will notice that 40% is sitting in the capital project fund. That's where cash is. Kathleen was talking about fund balances. Here we're actually talking about the cash, which is different, but can be related at times. And then the general fund combined is 23%. We have the city general has about 13.5% of that, and the county has about 9.5% of that 23. And then from there you see the breakdown of the varieties of funds that we have. So that gives you a general idea of where the cash balances are sitting in the various funds. And that is pretty close to about all we had to present as far as the slides. We have a few more comments to come, but I did want to mention that we have been discussing this presentation. This is a presentation that's required by our policy, our investment policy. We are required to come and provide this information, but we also have some flexibility on what we provide in this information. And so we've been discussing about changes that we might consider, and we would welcome any comments that you might have so that we can consider that as we build towards making some changes to the report to try to ensure it's as informative as possible.
For myself, I'm metrics driven. So, you know, I see the numbers. I know that the only thing that I've seen that has been out of compliance is that one investment group that holds a large portion, and I know that it should have some maturities coming up that'll bring it into compliance. But a lot of it is just, you know, a quick dashboard that tells me this is what our target is and this is where we are in relationship to our targets.
I really do appreciate the effort you put forth on return on investment. I really do, and I know these have been very trying economic times for CDs and bonds, and the pay has been almost 0% interest over the last handful of years. So I know it's been quite a challenge to everyone dealing with budgetary issues, but I sincerely appreciate and respect the work that you all have done and to ensure that we get the best return on our investment.
Great. Yeah, actually, to kind of butt up to that, this is the last formal slide that we presented, but Rick, myself, and Kathleen just completed what I'm just calling the local bank tour, if you will. We reviewed what would have been the 16 eligible financial institutions that have branches here in the county, and we met with 13 of them to kind of just prep them for what they were going to see from me in the next few months. Letting them know that we're going through getting them as essentially recertified to become eligible bidders, additionally giving them the local emphasis offer of a 1-year investment, $235,000, and just kind of let them know that who we are, our names, putting names to those that we have not met, faces for people that I've worked with in the last few months, but really let them know that we're here to do our due diligence to make sure that we give this opportunity for any bank in the county to come in and start working with me. That was finished in March. I sent out those letters on the 5th of April. They're all due back to me by the 3rd of May. That's going to be if they read our policy, agree to the terms, and if they want to bid or not. But the key factor there is that we wanted to just give this to you as information that in next quarter you're going to see some additional diversified financial institutions coming into play with that. I've already gotten 5 banks bidding on that local emphasis that have never bid with us before.
Wonderful.
not to, state that meeting with them changed anything, but I think it's just showing them that we have roots and we're here to really work with them and vice versa.
For some institutions, the RCD investments are not really into their business model, and so we may never get a bid from them, or some of them might just be on the edge. But we just realized last year, after watching the process, that we didn't get much response or enough response, and that's why we came up with the idea. Let's go meet with them and let them know what we're doing. They can choose whether to be a part of it or not, obviously, but at least we've done what we could to make sure they knew who we were and what we needed from them. And so we're cautiously optimistic that the next time we go out for bid, we might see some additional banks participating.
I wanted to just comment that since I started here 3 years ago, it's been a very big priority of mine to diversify the banks in which we work with, because basically we were only seeing sizable bids from 3 or 4 banks. And frankly, the former commissioner, Walker, also expressed his concern about that too. So, I applaud all the work that Rick and Andrea have done to make that, to achieve that end, so.
Well, and it also goes back to the return to the general fund when you refinance your bonds and find a better rate. And it's always cost savings and cost avoidance, and it's much appreciated. It provides really those hard-earned dollars back into the community, and it's the taxpayers' money, and we just want to be good stewards, and I applaud each and every one of you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I might point out that the graph on the bar chart on page 2 of 4 shows that the amount of revenue collected in interest earnings in 18 was over $3.5 million, which is substantially more than the amount collected in 2017, roughly about, just shy of 1.5. So, and of course that's because of the federal funds high rate increase, but those are dollars that have really helped assist our federal, our financial position, and mainly in the 3 general funds and the sewer fund, and capital projects fund.
Seeing none. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Just one question. In your meetings with the banks, and I applaud you also for going out there so these institutions can put name with the face. Is it up to the banks as to how much they want to participate in the program, or how is that decided, the amount of participation?
They are, for lack of a better term, enrolling currently for the next year to be eligible to participate. When we send bids out, we will send them to all those that are eligible to bid. They can choose to take all bids or the entire amount. They can choose to offer to take a portion of the amount, or they can choose to take none of the amount and not even submit a bid. That is completely up to their discretion.
Okay, so I'm queuing in on one of my banks, and over the years it seems that the amount of participation, I put it that way, seems to be pretty constant, so that would be by their choice.
Of course, just because they submit a bid doesn't mean they will get the contract or the placement as well, because if their bid isn't the best bid, they may not get the placement, or which did occur, the institution that was over the limit, when was that, in the fall? September. Okay, there was one of our institutions that is over our ratio of 30%. They did submit a good bid, but we did not take them because we already had so much money placed with them. So there's a couple of different factors involved on whether the bid will be placed with a given bank or not. But they fully make the choice about what they choose to bid on.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your presentations this evening. We do have one more item on our agenda this evening, and it's our last item for the evening, and that's a budget revision policy. So Kathleen, I see that you will be making that presentation, so whenever you're ready.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Burrows, I'm going to pass this presentation on to our Budget Director, Reginald Lindsay, please.
Okay. Reggie, you're up, buddy.
All right. So when we last met on April 1st, I presented the budget revisions to you all, and then some questions came up as far as the budget policies that we have. There were a few items on my budget revision report that did not come back when they were supposed to. And then there were also some questions about the discretionary policy. And so what we did was provide you the minutes from December 2nd of 2013.
I see that.
And so we just kind of wanted to open up and see if you all want to discuss those minutes, or if you wanted to kind of go through the policy, see what exactly you wanted to do.
I'll leave that up to the other members of the committee. If I remember correctly, the biggest point of discussion was the aggregate presentation that was made at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year budget cycle that presented all of the discretionary expenditures above $50,000 that were granted by the administrator. And to see those at the end of the year with no explanation, I think that was some of the concern. And committee, help me if I'm, or correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that was a discussion. And was it the 50,000? I mean, this was some of the questions that.
So there were some items that did come back that were approved by the county administrator and the mayor. They were considered emergencies, and they needed to come back in the next ED&F committee, but they did not come back until April. So I know there was some question about that. Then there was also some question about what was considered discretionary also, from what I remember. And there could have been some other things.
Are there any questions this evening? And I appreciate the budget policy to be being presented. And I look back and it's dated in 2013.
Yes.
So it hasn't been.
So it came to the committee on December 2nd of 2013, and then it went to the full commission on December 19th of 2013.
Well, I would just state to the committee, if this is something of concern, that we take an opportunity to review these and come forward with any suggestions or changes, and then we'll visit with staff and the other commissioners and bring forward a work product. Commissioner McKierney.
I've gone back and I've read the minutes of our 2013 meeting, and I think one of the questions that always comes up is was this truly an emergency for health and safety? Because that's the caveat on which the county administrator and the mayor can approve more than $50,000. And I'm sure for each of the expenditures of more than 50, they could justify that it was an emergency for health and safety. What I would just ask is, the policy does say that it'll be reported back to us at our next meeting, and we do just that, so that we don't let a long period of time elapse before it comes back, and we are then hit with multiple months worth of. So that would be my only request, is that we actually do try to bring it back to the next meeting.
We'll make sure we do that.
Yeah, we promised to do that.
Okay. And I would assume that there would be an explanation as to why those funds were such an emergency. I think there was some speculation as to how those funds were being spent. And we just want to ensure that if the policy's in place and it hasn't been reviewed in 6 years, maybe we need to increase the amount of money that can be spent, or maybe we'll look at additional criteria for reporting purposes. Just again, once again, about transparency. So any other questions or comments? Seeing none, this was for information purposes only. I have no other agenda items. I want to thank you for your patience. Staff, thank you for your patience with us this evening. We are adjourned.
So.
Remember, you can view meeting agendas and minutes online at wicokck.org. Or, to confirm meeting dates and times, you can also call the Unified Government Clerk's Office at 913-573-5260.